Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Fanfiction podcast. Today we will start a new journey of what if Belle was hungry for money. Before we start, please like, share, subscribe and comment in the comment section if you want anything. The grind for money never ends. Dammachi Draisel, Overlord. Gamer SI. We're just about closing up now, young miss, so why not take advantage of our discount and buy another crispy potato puff for Dash. I'm watching my weight, thank you, bye. I gave the woman's money pouch a long look as she departed from the street stand. I was working at part-time. There goes another 40 bonus experience points. I glanced up into the sky, which was turning a deep red, which I took as an indicator that I had been working a little longer than usual today. It's hard to tell the time when you can't just take out your smartphone in public to do so. If I knew I was going to be isekai'd into a fantasy world like this, then I would have worn my analog watch, or maybe not, as I had arrived in a shady alleyway, and most likely would have been shanked immediately for my well-designed watch. On the other hand, I would have broken the multiverse record for the quickest second death. Surely the bragging rights would have been worth it. Here you are, Leonard. This is today's pay. Thanks, geese. Will I be seeing you tomorrow? Nah, I was thinking about that part-time kitchen assistant job I saw somewhere on North Main Street. If you want to cook that much, then I can let you have a go at the fryer. And risk hot oil splattering on my skin. No thanks. Are you sure you're up for a job in the kitchen? Ha, don't answer that. Never. Mind. Here, take some of the leftovers. The male sheep person shook his head as I laughed and handed me an envelope that contained my pay. A waste of paper, if you ask me, but I appreciated the professionalism. 240 valis. I worked for 6 hours at a rate of 40 valis an hour. For a civilian, that was almost enough to buy ingredients for 4 meals. In my head, that was about $24. For 6 hours of part-time work, if I had to take into account the denominations of the valis coins and the relative purchasing power of that currency. I really need to get a stable, higher-paying job. I can't live with this sort of pay. Potato Boy quest has been completed. Crispy Potato Puff sales target has been met and exceeded. Sales target exceeded by 1560 valis, distributing 1560 bonus experience points. Conditions met. Merchant job class is now unlocked. A level up. You have reached level 8 and now have 1 unassigned level. All thoughts about job hunting were placed at the back burner as I assigned my new level to my first, basic class, Wizard, bringing my total equivalent caster levels up to 8. You can now learn Tier 2 spells. Please select up to 3 spells to learn. You have selected Invisibility, Shockwave, and Life Essence. Do you wish to learn these spells? Yes or no? Your spell list has been updated. A spell that lets me escape pursuers, a powerful attack spell, and an HP measuring spell that should serve as a makeshift power level scanning ability. Yeah, if I have these spells then, it should be safe to give the dungeon a try. At level 8, at the very least, my durability and strength should be superhuman. Enough that I wouldn't die to a weak-ass goblin. I came to the world of Dammachi with a gamer system copied right off from Overlord's LN Yggdrasil game, which itself happened to be a D&D ripoff. In practice, given my meta-knowledge of how the game works and how it was translated to the new world, leveling up there is a process of evolution to a higher being, apparently, where simply having a high level would also grant high defensive power and magic resistance by default in spite of whatever defensive power the basic status and skills effects a person might have. In addition to that, the effect also applies to attack potency, where even if the same edged instrument is used to stab someone, the extent of the wound inflicted could vary greatly even if the basic stats of 2 individuals with different levels were the same. That said, despite the versatility and potency of a Yggdrasil character, they are comparatively weak with regard to speed, at least when compared to most of the fictional series that I'm used to. Well, no point worrying about that now. I'll start complaining about my first world problems after I reach level 80 or something. Lesser mind protection. I silently recasted the first tier spell just after grabbing my crispy potato puffs and began my journey back to my cheap, dingy apartment somewhere in Daedalus Street. Compass. I did the same thing with a first-tier divination spell to help me find my way back home. I spent most of my attention avoiding danger rather than memorizing the route back perfectly, which was why I had to waste a tiny bit of MP every time I leave my room. I followed the directional arrows in my mind's eyes as I cautiously traversed through the dimly lit streets until finally I made it back to my temporary home. Taking out just enough valise to eat dinner, I dumped the rest of my pay into my wooden safe box, which I created using the create lesser item spell. I took off my local clothes, stuffed them into my item box, then retrieved my adventuring clothes, which is to say, my starter gear that came with the wizard class after my forced character creation session that locked me into the human race. Shame that, if I could pick any one of the humanoid races, I would have chosen that elf race so that I can become my ideal blonde big-titty hentai elf waifu. Just kidding. Mostly. I just wanted the additional lifespan so that the option to take things more slowly would be available as an option. Sadly, the higher dimensional being that dropped me here did not want to read about my slow life isekai biography. Anyways, I made my way to the dungeon with little trouble, outside of a few curious looks from some adventurers that were just returning from their day shift. Magic arrow. Okay. Hey. What the? Alright, the damage output of the spell does not depend on where the enemy was struck, but, seriously, died by taking an arrow to the knee. I did not expect that. The first tier spell that shot an arrow made out of mana is supposed to do minuscule damage. It was pretty much impossible for anyone to one-shot their enemies with a single cast unless the level disparity was just that high. The goblin's physical stats should have been comparable to or greater than that of an average adult male. As I was a trash-level character, our physical abilities should not have been that far apart, and even if it had no magic resistance, the single magic arrow killing it instantly is a bit weird, to say the least. My best guess is that my gamer system had designated the weakest monster from the dungeon as a level 1 or 2 monster, which allowed me to take advantage of the level disparity gained from grinding multiple part-time jobs, with the occasional quests, over the weeks. While it was beneficial to me right now, this might work against me at the higher levels if I don't keep up with the grind and try to fight something 20+ levels higher than myself. I picked up the magic stone dropped by the goblin and scanned it with my gamer system's default item description feature after putting it in my item box, focusing on the important part. Goblin magic stone, low rank. Description. Estimated local value at 400 valise. I checked my system's Yggdrasil gold exchange feature again. Unfortunately, this wasn't Han Jihan's gamer power, where he could make his enemies drop local currency just by beating or killing them. Current gold exchange rate. 1 Yggdrasil gold coin equals 9,996 valise. I did not dare to check the cash shop currency exchange rate for valise, knowing that it was at least a magnitude higher. Looks like I won't be rolling the gachapon for a cash item anytime soon, like, for the next decade or so. Heck, unless I find a shady dealer to exchange the stones in, I wouldn't be able to make any money off the magic stones I farm, for as the guild monopolizes the legal supply chain for magic stones. I wasn't a registered adventurer, hence, I can't sell it to them, not without using magic to mind whammy the clerks, which would probably be detected swiftly. And that wasn't about to change anytime soon, as I couldn't risk any god finding out about my origins and power, given that the application of the fauna gives the god a whole background summary for them to work with. Yeah, I really need to get a stable day job. I'm not playing as an undead character that can just sustain itself through its own misery. Food and proper rest are requirements for me. And since I can't make money by becoming an adventurer, at least not easily, I had to make money in other ways. Well, I'll think about that later. Time to grind some EXP while I have the time and energy to do so. Rabbit's Foot. I cast the first tier luck boosting buff. Let's see if it affects my drop rates or any other things. Wait a second. Couldn't I use my luck buffs to win big at the casinos? I think I will keep that in mind once I learn the higher tier luck buffs and gain enough levels so that no one would be able to easily ambush me and steal my winning afterward. Leonard character sheet. Alignment, good. Karma, 250. Total level, 8. Job level. Wizard, 8. Spell list, total 24 spells. First tier, 21 camouflage, compass, lesser mind protection, rabbit's foot, magic. Arrow, summon monster first, repair, sleep, create lesser item, etc. Second tier, 3 invisibility, shockwave, and life essence. I wish I brought a pickaxe. I could have broken up this quartz-like material and then use it for a few magical experiments if I had one. But alas, I was too eager to try my luck against some weak goblins and kobolds that I failed to prepare the necessary tools to make the best use of my time. All those hours studying in the guild library and repeatedly casting the translate spell have gone down the drain. Well, not really. It just means I have to spend some time putting my optimal farming guide into writing. All I need to do is take a day off, stop procrastinating, use create lesser item to make a passable notebook and pencil, then start writing. Just thinking about doing so is draining my energy already. Not that I have much energy right now, seeing as I drained my MP pool around half an hour into my first run and had to start punching monsters to death instead. Yes, I did in fact unlock warrior classes like Brawler and Warrior by doing so. Not that I would choose any of them. At least, not now. I was not aiming for a battle mage build like Nabral Gamma, who needed a single level in a warrior class to unlock the armored mage class. Admittedly, this was more of a deduction rather than fact. Unlike the actually Dracal players, I don't have the luxury of getting myself killed just to respec my build. I have to be deliberate about my chosen classes, too. The point where I might need to hold my levels until I unlock a stronger, rarer class. Like the next stage of a wizard job class, High Wizard, which I unlocked after allocating my 10th level into Wizard. Should I try to squeeze out another level? With around 10 levels difference, the monsters are now doing close to 0 damage, but the EXP gain has dropped sharply. I had been going around all the monster pantries on the first floor killing dozens to hundreds of monsters with my bare hands in order to level up, which eventually, of course, I did. Leveling was easy in the original DMMORPG. The same ease of leveling has carried over into my second life in this world, as getting EXP from the weakest monsters had still given me EXP gains comparable to my EXP sources above ground. Until now, most of the EXP I had accumulated came from 3 sources. Quests were self-explanatory. Job EXP was gained from any productive activity, which sometimes has a quest attached to it, with a visible result, and lore EXP, which is gained from learning about the world, either from getting information from others or reading books maps from places like the guild's public library. Seeing as the game was heavily inspired by D&D, it came as no surprise that they adapted how experience points would be gained in a campaign with morph mechanics. Nah, I should get some sleep. 4 levels over 3 hours of grinding is pretty good, especially for a low-level area. And way better than those fucking hardcore Korean MMORPGs. I still remember how fucking hard it was to level up in the old Mapleistery and Ragnarok Online. I collect the remaining magic crystals and drop items, sorted them, then added them to my item box stacks, keeping items that I would rarely take out in public. In my item box is extremely convenient and secure. Still, I wish that my pocket dimension access method was a little less conspicuous. If it was, then I could store most of my Valis in my item box and retrieve it easily. Right now, the amount of money I had in reserve couldn't even warrant the purchase of a pouch. Aya, I need more money. I have all these magic stones and drop items, but I can't even make money off them. Not legally, anyways. I was a law-abiding citizen and I couldn't find it in myself to get involved with criminals unless their karma values are high, and they were forced into that life, especially cute girls. For more practical reasons, I was just too weak right now, and there was no way I was going to get involved in Orario's black economy and survive with my current level of power. I need to be at least level 80 before I can even think about getting on the wrong side of the law. Now then, I think I forgot which pantry I was in. I took out a drawing of the first floor map that I made based on the guild's records. As expected of my D-grade art skills, it was a crude copy of the actual map, very crude. Like seriously, my hypothetical 4-year-old child could draw better than me. Regardless of my below-trash grade map, it still gave me a general direction toward the exit. After a 30-minute light jog, with the occasional monster skull crushing, I had made it back up to the ground floor of Babel. 20 minutes later, I made it back home with the help of my compass spell. My MP reserves were just above 75% by the time I arrived home. Not wanting to be inefficient with my MP before I slept, I started casting a few lifestyle spells. Thank you, higher dimensional being, for including a useful selection of new world and traditional D&D spells for me to learn. That said, cantrips petch when I want my prestidigitation. Cast, create lesser item, acquire wooden basin, cast, create water, wooden. Basin is now filled with clean sweet water, quick wash and wipe down, dump the water, use the leftover volume of water available to me while I create water. Time limit is still running to fill up a few cups, rehydrate myself, etc. Next up, laundry time. Widen magic, clean. My cutlery, furniture, clothes, and equipment have been cleansed in an instant. As expected of the clean spell, the first tier spell with the range metamagic modifier can clean an entire room like it was nothing. Maybe I should start a cleaning business. I could get paid a few hours worth of minimum wage for casting a few modified first tier spells, costing an amount of MP that I would get back in a fraction of the expected cleaning time. Easy money, easy life. I guess I'll sleep on it. But first, widen magic, detect magic, widen magic, detect life. Looks like most of the other occupants are fast asleep and everyone is where they should be. No stalkers had followed me back home either, nor are there any magical items or traps within the vicinity. Extend magic, alarm. Extend magic, summon monster second. I set up an alarm around my room that would alert me if someone got in while I was still asleep. Knowing that I was a heavy sleeper and that I would need time to respond to invaders, I also summoned a second-tier monster, a vicious shadow owl, to stand guard and buy time against my would-be attackers. Now then, I pointed myself and cast Sleep. Foo. I love how easy it is to fall asleep with this spell. Insomnia can suck my balls. The next day, I felt like patting myself on the back. I had just finished reading a pamphlet without relying on the translate spell. Korini was, after all, basically English with the alphabets swapped for different symbols. All I had to do was memorize the characters, then familiarize myself by actually using them. If I did not need information desperately back then I could have learned the written language earlier. Well, my journey to learn a new language hasn't quite ended yet, as I still needed to practice writing Korini. Normally, I would be pleasantly surprised by anyone actually making use of our guild's library, but you're not even planning to be an adventurer. The red-haired werewolf guild employee's words brought me out of my musings. I smiled back at her and said, "That may be so, however, I plan to go into business. At some point, adventurers are bound to be some of my customers, so understanding the pain points of their journey is of utmost importance." I had a few years of experience in sales, pre-sales, consultant, and data analysis work. Not a lot, but enough experience to understand that not knowing enough about your customer and employee's journey and experiences is like holding up a "please bankrupt my business" sign. This made it easy to provide a technically truthful response laden with common sense to the guild employee. As far as my future plans are concerned, I am definitely planning to do business in order to generate passive income, and I wasn't planning to be an adventurer, as getting a Falna was not an option for me. She hummed, staring rather intently at me. Is it closing time, or something? The newbie employee was giving me the kind of look a waitress would give me if I was occupying a table for too long. Your smell. Hey, I don't smell, do I? Okay, fine, I guess I should be buying some soap and all. You don't have it. Huh. Ah, whoops. Maybe I shouldn't cast odorless too often. It looks like it would make me seem unnatural to those with enhanced senses, certain demi-humans and pretty much all adventurers. I think it's the effect of an heirloom, a magical item with a weak effect to erase my body odor. You see, the men on my father's side dash. Too much information. I just wanted to make sure you knew my innate loner job skill to bullshit in such a way that no one wants to continue a conversation with me anymore is useful, as expected. I appreciate it, truly. Thanks, Rose. Have a nice day. You have 2 hours till closing time, Leonard. Gotta love the guild's customer service. They even come with a free alarm and notification service. I spent my remaining 2 hours compiling several pages worth of cultural and economic information without the use of the translate spell into my lore book. A level up. You have reached level 13 and now have one unassigned level. Funnily enough, that netted me just enough job EXP to level up again to level 13. What is this notification? Conditions met. Sage job class is now unlocked. My jaw dropped at the notification. I did not expect to see it anytime soon. I had all sorts of plans to use the few monster corpses I had in my item box, to skin them while keeping the magic stone inside, then hold a spell so that I could copy the magic circle, an optional effect, onto the monster skin in a crude attempt to make a magic scroll just to get a caster or production job class. Like how smithing-type job classes also provided warrior levels, certain classes, like war mage and enchanter, gave out equal caster levels as well. One of my notebooks contained obscure occultic rituals involving blood sacrifice that I intended to use in order to get a feel of my magic so that I could learn magic, like the New Worlders, and unlock their classes. Specifically, I wanted access to the spiritual caster spells along with magical item production abilities, which the New Worlders could get using the Sage class, and the Forbidden Arts user class, an alternative branch to that job class. Keenoff Fazris Invern from the Overlord side story, who only had 8 levels in the Sorcerer class, could cast up to the 3rd tier magic precisely because her 5 levels in the Sage class and 7 levels in the more advanced High Sage class counted as caster levels. In the Yggdrasil game, the Sage class was a lore-based class, one that likely focused on information-gathering spells. In the New World, it was a 3-in-1 combo class that gave caster levels, production abilities, and access to buffing spells. My version of the Sage class gave me all of the above. Oh, and the skills, so good. That reminds me, I have 39 skill points to spend. Skills were the name of the game for high-leveled characters regardless if you were humanoid, demi-human, or heteromorph. But right now, I don't feel like using my brain power to figure out how to specialize my build. Instead, I wanted to go splurge on myself and celebrate my early achievement. I exited the guild building, took one look in the direction of the recently completed Hostess of Fertility, turned around, and walked in the exact opposite direction in search of a place to eat. Updated Leonard character sheet. Alignment, good. Karma, 250. Total level, 13. Job level. Wizard, 10. High Wizard, 2. Sage, 1. HP, 9. MP, 18. PHY. ATK, 5. PHY. Def, 5. Agility, 6. Mag ATK, 15. Mag Def, 15. Resistance, 6. Special ability, 11. Total, 90. Spell list, total 24 spells. First tier, 21 Camouflage, Compass, Lesser Mind Protection, Rabbit's Foot. Magic Arrow, Summon Monster First, Repair, Sleep, Create Lesser Item. Camouflage, Clean, Create Water, Alarm, Odorless, Detect Magic, Detect Life. Detect Poison and Disease, Feather Fall, Translate, Magic Shield, Identify. Second tier, 18 Acid Arrow, Blur, Continued Light, Invisibility, Lesser Reinforce. Armor, Lesser Break Item, Lesser Dexterity, Life Essence, Magic Lock, Mass. Compass, Message, Mana Essence, Suggestion, Zone of Truth, See Invisibility. Shockwave, Summon Monster Second, Silence. The Grind for Money Never Ends 3, Danmachi Yggdrasil, Overlord, Gamer. Sigh. Help menu. Click. Where can I read my character's flavor text? There is no such thing. I erased my query and start typing on the semi-transparent digital-like interface. Again. Is luck a hidden stat? How can I see it? Through ingenuity, anything can be achieved or discovered if one tries hard. Enough. Okay, thank you Gamer System, for giving me a very corporate answer to my question. Honestly, is it so hard to confirm my suspicions of hidden stats that might have been the result of character log history and player skills? There were some theories about how Momonga's avatar came with lots of actual intelligence and wisdom, considering his whole RP build with appropriate skill. Names that suited a dark ruler. In addition to that, Ain's incredible luck, if you count succeeding in a way that perpetuates his lonely and empty existence, and the existence of luck buffs also lends credence to the theories. I was a partial believer in those fan theories, if only for the fact that Ain's picked up on various skills at an accelerated rate, e.g. control, amnesia, usage plus etiquette. Skills, compared to his human self. Also, during yesterday's celebratory dinner, where I treated myself to a filling meal, I ended up sitting next to a worried newbie blacksmith who accidentally wasted beginner monster drops and did not have the budget to purchase them back from the guild at their going rates. He was more than happy, ecstatic even, to take some of my goblin fangs and cobbled nails off my hands at its wholesale price, which is what I would have gotten if I were a registered adventurer. By the next afternoon, I had become 12,000 valis richer. There were certainly several moments in my life where things just fell into place. Like that, which I attributed to God's timing TM. Right now, I really wanted to find out if that luck was translated as part of my background lore or as a hidden luck stat. Musings aside, my unexpected windfall allowed me to pay my rent 2 months ahead of time, while still leaving me with around 10,000 valis for my daily expenses and plans. I had stored most of it in my item box and was now traversing various stores in Orario to identify potentially useful items for myself. Potion, low grade. Lore, a potion created by on the top shelf of the Familia's store. Because 500 valis. Effects, recovers a small amount of HP and can restore a small amount of flesh. Does not automatically repair bones or correct bone placements. Does not replenish blood. My new skill from the Sage Job class, Discover Lore 2, was extremely helpful in that regard. With regards to objects and entities, it appears to function like how I might expect the Observe skill owned by many fanfic protagonists with the Gamer would work. Most of the skills available to me cost anywhere from 1 to 10 skill points depending on the power of the skill, whether it was a standalone skill or it was just the first level of a skill, etc. Yesterday, I had chosen a number of skills from the Sage class as it suited my future plans, along with a few no-brainer skills from the Wizard and High Wizard classes. From the latter two, I mostly chose the foundational skills needed to improve my spell efficiency and defensive capabilities, like Magic Damage 2, a metamagic. Cost Down I, Spell Cost Down 2, and Mid-Tier Magic Resistance. The skills from the Sage class were mostly focused on information gathering, item crafting, and improving the effects of my buffs, for example, Locate Item, Caster. LVL Day, Magic Item Production 2, a buffing magic enhancement, and Enchant 2. In the case of the skill I was currently spamming, Discover Lore 2 allowed me to get information from objects and entities that are graded as low, mid, high, and top or are within a certain level range. It would be an extremely useful skill in combat as well, since it can be used to discern enemy characteristics and possible weaknesses. It might even be more useful than the Discern Enemy spell, but I will have to investigate that hypothesis next time when I actually unlock that spell. Anyways, back to my window shopping. Mind Potion, mid-grade. Lore, asterisk yada yada Mayak things asterisk. 10,000 valis. Effects, removes moderate mental fatigue, staves off mana exhaustion, for up to 10 minutes, and increases MP regeneration rate by 250% for 10 minutes. As expected, I wouldn't get an easy way to recover MP in this world. In Yggdrasil, there was no such thing as mana potions. Magic casters had to rest properly in order to recover their MP. It could take up to 6 hours in the game, while in the new world, Ains had to spend a whole day to recover his entire massive MP pool. My MP recovery time for my relatively small MP pool was quite short in comparison, averaging around 1 to 2 hours. I learned my lesson yesterday as I experienced the consequences of foolishly exhausting my MP. I was fortunate that I had accumulated enough EXP to level up and allocate some levels into my job classes, which restored a bit of MP to keep me awake and strong enough to punch monsters to death. In this world, it would seem that the mags of this world do not use their internal mana to cast their spells, at least, not to the extent that I did. I was wholly reliant on my internal MP. While in the Danmachi franchise, a mage can theoretically cast as many spells as they can until they mind down or collapse from mental exhaustion. My current theories are that they were drawing magic from their surroundings or from their souls, which could be structured in such a way that they have infinite MP, but a limited ability to draw upon it. Yet another thing to look into next time. At any rate, mind potions are definitely worth investing in the future, even if it doesn't give me immediate MP recovery, it would still shorten my rest time considerably. I left the blue pharmacy after enduring some glares from some random female that clearly wants to get some alone time with best boy Mayak. I was just about done anyways, and I needed to stock up on materials to make magic items and tools for my next dungeon trip, which will involve a lot of dungeon lizard deaths, and to buy some sausages for dinner. My daydreams of delicious sausages were interrupted by some random loud male shouting something and a crowd gathering around the little commotion. As I was part of the mob, I should be moving towards my destination while remaining unbothered by the little event. You stupid girl. I heard a loud smack and my legs started going out of control. All you had to do was stab the fucking goblin in the eye and you can't even do that right. How am I supposed to make enough money for my next bottle of dash? A hand was placed upon that Otis man that smelled of wine. Wait, isn't that my hand? When did I get so close? What? I'm just as confused as he was. Even so, I knew I could, and wanted to do, at least this much. I hated the idea of twisting someone's mind, but I can always make exceptions. Silent extend magic. Suggestion. The silently cast spell took hold near instantly, and I quickly improvised to set the scene in a way that would draw no suspicions to me. Listen here, you don't want to hurt that little girl anymore. You want to go home and rethink your life. I made my suggestion with a threatening tone while glancing at a crowd to emphasize the public disturbance aspect of my points. Oh, thank God, I managed to improvise something that satisfied the 20-word limit. For the spell. Why yeah. The man looked around, seemingly noticing that he was in a public place for the first time, and guiltily looked down at the small child that shared his features and said, I want to go home and rethink my life. I nodded and exited the scene coolly while ignoring whatever the crowd was saying. I'm glad that's over with. Back to business. What a terrible father. That poor girl. I'm glad that young man stepped in dash. That scumbag got lucky. If it was me that stepped in, I would have dash. I almost rolled my eyes at the same civilians that blamed the Zeus and Hera. Famelia for the audacity of failing to kill the one-eyed black dragon. There, you see, young Kagaya. All it takes is for someone with a heart of justice to dash. I power-walked even faster away from the scene as someone started assigning the lawful good stupid alignment to me. Nope, no way. I don't want to hear anymore. 5 minutes of blending into the busy crowds later, I was now leaning against a flower shop's wall and started slapping my forehead with one of my notebooks. Ikura's Quora. Ikura's Quora. Ikura's Quora. Some of the logic of the new worlders apply to me, right? That means I can force a new spell into existence, right? Can I create a spell to erase my own recent memories already? So cringe. I want to hide under a blanket and rethink my life. Oh right, I couldn't afford a comfy blanket yet, so I can't even do that. Screw this. I ran towards my home, performed my usual protective spells, changed into my battle equipment, and decided to pull a Bell Cranel. In other words, YOLO dungeon run. I should be able to forget my recent stupid actions if I did something much more moronic, like punching hundreds of dungeon lizards to death. The grind for money never ends. For Danmachioi Dracel, Overlord. Gamer SI. One of the very few things that I appreciated about this universe's gods is that they took the time to introduce modern and cultured clothing like the guild employee uniform, bunny suits, and bikinis. Wearing cheap, local garb allowed me to adopt the background character status. However, the comfort it provided was barely adequate. That is to say, it made me itch a lot. More expensive clothing might have resolved the issue, although admittedly, I would still harbor a dislike for most of the local fashion and avoid them on principle even if I could afford them. Oh, my modern clothes, how I missed thee. Once upon a time, it was inconceivable that I would ever come to love wearing work clothes. But reality has a tendency to align events in such a way that my preconceptions would be rendered absurd and obsolete. The fact that I am living my second life in this world with a gamer-like system was Exhibit A. The comforting familiar sensation of my black cotton shirt covering my upper body, my warm gray suit jacket and matching trousers, black formal shoes, okay. Maybe not the last one. My work outfit may have been enchanted with various effects, but my work shoes are still as uncomfortable as ever. It does make me look pretty good if I dare say so. Myself, still, I wouldn't wear it in the dungeon for long. That was what my sports shoes were for. The 4th tier, create item, spell is truly one of the most useful spells of all time. Incidentally, my sports shoes were part of my battle outfit, which consisted of a hooded white-colored drake-hide cloak and a few matching accessories that suited that of a wizard. All things considered, I think everyone else, monsters included, would be paying more attention to the rest of my outfit instead of making a big fuss about my out-of-place black-branded, fake, sports shoes. Why would I wear a pair of shoes when they did not suit my theme? Because it comforts me. I don't need a better reason for that. That said, something is missing. I looked around my temporary workstation, the 12th floor's monster pantry, which I had cleared out 2 hours ago. It was the only place in the dungeon where I could fight and work in peace. After all, almost all rational adventurers wouldn't bother with risking their lives against dozens to hundreds of monsters resting in a monster pantry. If they were capable of fighting so many monsters with little risk, then they were capable of continuing on to a lower floor where the excellior and magic stone values were significantly higher. The other equally important reason for doing so was because my cheap apartment is too small for me to craft magic items in, especially when I have to work with large monster corpses like that of ogres, silverbacks, and infant dragons. Crafting and enchanting required monster parts, which I could only get by dissecting the corpses while leaving the magic stone attached to their body. If I removed it or accidentally damaged too much of the tissue connected to the magic stone, the monster corpse would just turn into ashes, leaving me with only a magic stone and, if I'm lucky, a drop item. Utterly wasteful. Instead, I used Demiurge's Happy Farm experiment results to increase my material usage efficiency. Simply put, the process of healing a subject whose skin has been removed using tier magic would erase the removed skin from existence. However, performing the healing after the live subject's removed skin has been processed into a scroll containing a tier spell would allow the subject to be healed as usual, along with the continued existence of the magic item created from the subject's natural material produce. In summary, all I had to do was keep the monster's body intact and only alter it, using physical means like traditional butchering, skinning, dissection, etc. Process the material taken before doing anything that would repair or destroy the body entirely. This was especially useful when working with rare monsters like the blue peciulior, an infant dragon. After taking care to not destroy the important parts of the monsters, like the Butterfree Ripoff's healing powder scaly wings or the dragons, well, everything, I could pretty much guarantee the usage of rare, useful monster parts to utilize with my crafting skills. As I wasn't a divine caster, I needed a source of cheap and convenient healing. The blue peciulior wings could do just that after I infused its abilities into an item. The issue I encountered was that the ability could only be used a couple of times before it was spent and that the effect was extremely weak. Infusing the rest of the monster's body could only improve it by a minuscule amount, a difficult task, considering that the peciulior monsters were very fragile and small compared to other monsters. I came to realize that I was missing an important component: data crystals. Players like that of the deoungen members had to farm for ages just to get enough data crystals to make any of their guild weapons' divine tier abilities, namely, the one that allowed Momonga to summon primal elementals. Data was everything in Yggdrasil. It was why the shitty developers made so much money. If everything was limited by data, and items had a limited amount of data that they could contain, then of course you would shell out cash just to add in special effects that cost no item data space or flat out increase its data limits. The amount of data you had was especially important when it came to summoning monsters or using enemy skills. Deoungen had flat out run out of monster data for their hyper-competent ninja summons after some time in the New World. Sure, the guild had an entire library stocked with every monster data imaginable so that they could summon any type of mercenary when needed. But when that stock ran out, they simply could not summon any more Hanzos, despite having enough gold to do so. The staff of Deoungen could summon practically any monster from the 3rd tier Moonlight Wolf to the top tier primal elementals without running out of data. The only thing that limited it was an X number of monsters summoned per day. Limitation, probably. How did they achieve that? Lots and lots of grinding. Thousands upon thousands of data crystals condensed into a single divine tier. Gem-shaped artifact. Repeat another 6 times, and you had 7 divine tier gems, capable of nearly any magical spell possible with an equally impressive main staff. Body with literal auto-attack features that can pick the best spells to use based on the enemy encountered. I had nearly zero access to data crystals. Data was what defined the profile. Existence of players, NPCs, monsters, items, dungeons, and other things found in the game. In real life, it was probably the crystallization of an entity's essence. However, there was an alternative to that, if only in the case of monsters. It may be minuscule, but every magic stone contains a tiny record of a monster's existence. If it were not so, then my Discover Lore skill series would not be able to read the history of each individual monster's slightly different background by examining their magic stones alone. Magic stones were the DNA of monster souls. And so, after an entire week of grinding, I finally had enough magic stone stacks and other materials, war shadow drop items, to properly craft my first magic ring. Emblem ring of the blue butterfly, mid-rank. Effects. Plus passive healing equivalent to the 3rd tier divine spell, regenerate, to the wearer. Plus passive disease recovery equivalent to the 2nd tier divine spell, cure disease, to the wearer. Plus grants skill, healing scales. With a thought, the wearer may create a handful of shining scales that provides an instance of the healing effects listed above to a single target it touches. Can be used up to 7 times per day. Along the way, I had also farmed enough magic stones to create a few adequate, mid-ranked magical gear for both daily and dungeon diving uses. But I feel like I'm still forgetting something important. I idly checked the character status to see if something was amiss. Alignment, good. Karma, 275. Total level, 32. Unassigned level, 5. Job level. Wizard, 10. High Wizard, 10. Sage, 5. HP, 20. MP, 40. PHY. ATK, 10. PHY. Def, 10. Agility, 11. Mag ATK, 27. Mag Def, 27. Resistance, 11. Special ability, 24. Total, 180. Spell list, total 75 spells. First tier, 21 camouflage, compass, lesser mind protection, rabbit's foot. Magic arrow, summon monster first, repair, sleep, create lesser item. Camouflage, clean, create water, alarm, odorless, detect magic, detect life. Detect poison and disease, feather fall, translate, magic shield, identify. Second tier, 21 acid arrow, blur, continued light, invisibility, lesser reinforce. Armor, lesser break item, lesser dexterity, lesser magic boost, life essence. Magic lock, mass compass, message, mana essence, minor illusion, preserve. Suggestion, zone of truth, see invisibility, shockwave, summon monster second. Silence. Third tier, 21 copy, dimension move, disease, fly, haste, hot spring, land. Mine, lesser full potential, lesser magic seal, lightning, luck, magic shield. Slow, summon monster third, thunderball, catnap, etc. Fourth tier, 14 charm species, clairvoyance, control cloud, create item. Dehydration, hold person, mind protection, scare, see through, shock lance. Silver lance, summon monster fourth, etc. I had killed enough monsters nearly every day for the past 3 weeks that I reached level 32 despite the heavy EXP penalty. I still had some unassigned levels as I wanted to try unlocking uncommon and rare job classes before committing some levels to them. The Prestige class 4, High Wizard, which was probably Grand Wizard or something like that, with only a max of 5 levels as the pattern for high-tier job usually goes, had not appeared on my list of available jobs. It was likely the case that there was a minimum caster level requirement in order to unlock it, like how the ninja class in Yggdrasil required a minimal level of 60. I saw it as a shallow attempt by the shitty developers to force a pure caster to try out other classes and to prevent them from getting the really nice skills that belonged to the highest basic wizard class too early into their character build. Either way, I should do some research into whatever sages are supposed to actually do. Perhaps I have to write an award-winning book on dungeon lore or monsters. After all, Kino did not simply accumulate knowledge of magic items and monsters through her adventures and Satoru's Yggdrasil knowledge, but in fact used it on a regular basis by analyzing any enemies that the new Ain's old gown had faced and providing advice accordingly. Knowledge not shared remains unknown. Perhaps I have to share knowledge in such a way and be known for it in order to unlock the High Sage class. I already have some ideas on how I would go about that. However, I think I will take a long rest, brainstorm some other possible ways to gain new classes, and figure out what is that nagging feeling telling me that I'm forgetting something important. I stared at my equipment tab, which clearly showed that the only 2 pieces of gear I was really missing were another magic ring and a magic staff. I was still using my fucking beginner's wooden staff. Oh god, I look like a noob. A quick glance at the carved-up infant dragon corpse, more like Drake's corpse. It's wingless with 4 legs, after all, and my skills described it as such, and did. Some quick maths. Screw it. I'll make a staff out of its spine, infuse its corpse into it, then hunt another infant dragon to complete it. Many hours, and more than 5 infant dragons later, I stowed away my Drakebone staff after making it home safe and sound, casting invisibility and a slew of defensive spells that allowed me to hide my presence, and mind was becoming routine to me. Looking up at the darkening skies, I could only laugh at the irony of me pulling yet another all-nighter in the dungeon. Work-life balance was a thing I understood in my first life, yet somehow, I seemed to have lost that understanding after coming into this world. I blame the shitty devs that gave me a system that incentivized unhealthy amounts of grinding for those that won't, or can't, pay to win by utilizing the cash shop. Well, in the end, I made those bad choices, so it was up to me to fix it. I need to take a break. I had enough levels to go into the middle floors and maybe just a few floors past Rivera safely. My gear was also all mid-ranked, which should be appropriate for my level, maybe. But if I went down there now, I fear that I might lose myself to the grind that never ends. I should treat myself to a big, meaty dinner, preferably with some delicious sausages. If there was a specialty food product for Orario, it just has to be their sausages. I exited my home and sneaked off into the main street, where I started bugging people for some restaurant recommendations based on whether their sausages were good or not. I gave up after the 21st person I asked answered hostess of fertility. What is with my luck? I can't keep running into people that only eat mainstream food, can I? Then again, I'm asking the people that walk around the main street, which is exactly the sort of people with bad taste that would eat at places that were built on prime locations like MIA Grand's restaurant. As a self-proclaimed foodie, there was no way I could rely on the recommendations and reviews of the masses, which I had found to be left wanting around half the time back on Earth. I wandered around Orario till late at night, exploring each and every restaurant I came across, using the Discover Lore skill to compare every dish I could lay my eye on with each other. I spent so much time comparing the food, drinks, restaurants, and restaurant owners themselves that I had actually forgotten to sit down and eat. Ooh, I'm so hungry, and a lot of the good affordable places are now closed. The only acceptable places that were still open were the extremely expensive restaurants, which I can't afford because I spent nearly all my money on supplies over the past few weeks. Goo, back to minimal wage life. No, I won't stand for that. I would rather become a famous sellout of a food critic. Incidentally, I could legitimately become a very good food critic thanks to Discover Lore. Unfortunately, I need some starting capital in order to begin eating at the right places, build up a reputation, and publish my reviews to the unenlightened masses. Oh, screw it, maybe I'll go into the dungeon one more time today and cook some monster meat instead. Hell, Zold managed to do it. Why can't I become a gourmet for monster cuisine like Leos of Dungeon Meshi? If there is nothing particularly appealing about a monster, then I can just grind up their meat to make sausages. Like, say, goblin sausages. Mgumga. I almost vomited when the first thing that came to mind was all the goblin rape tagged images that I would search for almost every day. I did not need the image of goblin pizza delivery men delivering big sausages to women. Goblin Slayer, what a series you are. You turned me into a bigger degenerate for my sake. Ugh, I think I need something light to eat, like soup. I feel like I would actually Vomit if I ate something heavy. Hey, you. Get in line. Heh. The line's back there. It looks like I wandered off into a poor district, and there was a line of citizens that were just as lacking in valor as I was lined up. Oh, sorry, wasn't paying attention. Can you tell me what is this about? A really kind goddess is running a soup kitchen. Now that I think of it, your clothes are. Ah yes, my casual clothes are too nice to be in this part of the town, much less be partaking in charity meant for the poor. But damn it, I am actually under the poverty line, so you can't make me leave. Silent widen boost magic. Suggestion. There is nothing unusual with me being here. There is no need to make a fuss or remember my presence here after I'm done with my business. I boosted the spell up to the 4th tier for a larger word count and targeted the people in the queue that were busybodies. After that, I lined up for my free meal. Come to think of it, the goddess of poverty Penia had descended for a long time, though she is usually operating in Daedalus Street. I wonder if she is running the soup kitchen here. If so, then I will have to make a big donation to her one day. Oh my, I can't say I imagine seeing you again in a place like this. The goddess currently serving me free soup along with her famelia was certainly not Penia. She was the most beautiful woman I had laid my eyes on. I held off my near-habitual routine of examining her using discover law in a feat of triggering some divine response and tried my best to keep my eyes off her body. Okay, stay calm, Leonard. All I need to do is say the truth, namely, that I did not recall meeting her before. Since arriving in Orario, it shouldn't trigger any weird half-truth response since the statement avoids any mention of having known of Estrella before my isekai journey. You. I'm very poor. I have never been this nervous in my life. Hee hee, so you are. Here you go, drink slowly, it's hot. You're hot. Thank God I did not say that out loud. Or else that cranky-looking black-haired midget with a katana might try gutting. Meh. Not that she would succeed, but I don't want that kind of attention. Would you like a second helping? Oh crap, I just drank the entire bowl right there and then. I'm fine. I'll just not hold up the line anymore. I ran off after throwing the few remaining Valis coins I had into the donation box. I don't want to think about my luck anymore. I don't want to think about how side characters already know about me after all I have done to keep a low profile. It's time for yet another stress-relieving grinding session in the dungeon. I'll take a rest for real tomorrow. Really? I will. After all, I'm completely out of Valis now and I need to do some legal work again. Chapter 5. 3 months later. New. You can't. I won't allow it. You can't leave now when we're just about to seat the high rollers. I'm sorry that I have to spring this up on you. However, I have urgent matters to attend to. And as per our contract, it was agreed upon that I could leave whenever I wanted so long as I forfeited the day's pay. I can pay you double, triple, no, 10 times your base pay. Please. We have Freya of all the goddesses wanting to eat at my establishment dash. Exactly why I was tendering my resignation. Not that I was about to reveal that information, lest I gain even more attention. That being said, I was just about reaching my limits anyways. I should have figured that I was overstaying my welcome when more and more weirdo women tried propositioning me during work times. I couldn't see why they were doing so when I was only slightly above average looking in my world, and therefore below average in Fantasyland, so I chalked it up to those women being that desperate or having deviant plans for me. Just let me work in peace, damn it. The incidents kept increasing in frequency, which I was told to ignore when I brought it up with my boss, and for someone that found interacting with strangers, especially assertive ones, to be akin to being in a room filled with emotional vampires, it was only natural that I felt the need to leave, which was only held back by my greater desire for legal tender. And wow, was I getting paid a lot. 10,000 Valis a day was nothing to sneeze at for a civilian. Well, I only started getting that pay after I effectively took over the responsibilities of a second head waiter, sous chef, and sommelier at the same time around a week into my job. Gaining levels alone had already boosted my learning speed and actual capabilities to great heights. The Sage Job class and Discover Law were especially broken when it came to any job that required knowledge and ensuring quality, which was a must-have for any sophisticated, fine dining establishment. I was so good at my unofficial job roles that I improved the restaurant's food and service quality efficiency, and reputation by a huge amount just by being there. Incidentally, I gained quite a bit of EXP and unlocked several civilian jobs like chef, super chef, storyteller, manager, and many more while I was there. I should have realized that it was only a matter of time before Freya would make a reservation at the high-end restaurant I was working in, given that it was situated within Babel, where she owned at least one private room, and that other goddesses had already started gossiping about the place, so it was practically a must for her to check it out at least once. No amount of money was worth being anywhere near Freya. I would rather burn a few bridges than to even be in the same room as that crazy bitch. Silent boost extend magic. Suggestion. That said, if I have the opportunity to smooth some ruffled feathers and prevent future complications by only resorting to low-level mind manipulation, then I can accept the use of the suggestion spell, as the compulsion it bestows is only temporary, and any lasting changes is a result of the target's own mind. I said a few words to get my boss to relax and not hold any hard feelings against me for leaving so suddenly, then went off in the exact opposite direction from where the tower's elevator was. I silently cast a few of my usual spells, then looked out the glass window in one of Babel's many shops. Silent delay magic, invisibility. There was no need to waste MP casting lesser magic seal, which could store up to a tier 4 spell for future use, as I only needed to delay the activation of invisibility for a few seconds instead of holding a spell for the whole day. The invisibility effect would break if I cast a spell afterward, which was why I needed to delay its activation until I made my next move. Silent magic, dimension move. The line of sight teleportation spell meant for creating distance between a squishy caster and a warrior allowed me to teleport right outside of Babel Tower, foregoing the proper exits on the off chance that Freya or any other creepy woman was looking for me. My invisibility spell took hold immediately after, followed by my already present first tier, feather fall, spell, allowing me to slowly fall towards the ground and land safely and unseen, somewhere northwest of Babel. Once that was done, I quickly changed into my casual clothes and made my way to my home. I continued walking and jumping in the northwest direction, all the way on the other side of Orario relative to Daedalus Street, towards my new home right around the middle point between the Hephaestus and Goibnu Famelia homes. I had rented out the place from the Hephaestus Famelia, who owned the district, through the guild, with Rose's help, as the larger living space was a requirement for my newest activities. And more importantly, I couldn't stand living like I was under the poverty line anymore. Opening the front door, I was greeted by the sight of a living room cramped and full of furniture created using magic. It reminded me of the home I was born into, my first home, which my family had moved out of when I turned 12 years old. I shut the door behind me, gave a thumbs up at the shadow demon keeping guard underneath the window, then sat myself down at the replica of my family's piano. I allowed myself to look at the picture-perfect copy of a photo frame containing a photograph of my family when I was little, bad picture quality, for modern standards, included. It was a picture that I couldn't even remember clearly, yet my magic replicated it perfectly. If I had any doubts about following the path of a magic caster, it ended right there. When I managed to recreate each family photo I had even glanced at in my past one spell at a time, I pulled up the cover for my piano and started playing Moonlight Sonata, one of the only classic songs that I bothered to try learning back in the day. When I was done, I made my way toward the kitchen, where I made myself a gourmet hot dog for lunch. After cleaning up, I accessed the magically locked secret door hidden behind the magic stone-powered fridge and jumped down into the secret basement that I had created from scratch. Good afternoon. I greeted my summoned monster managing my recently created magical items. My lord, you have returned early. The summoned lump of sand responded with a garbled voice created by moving 2 sand tentacles. A goddess that I had prioritized avoiding was in the area. It could not be helped. Anything interesting to report? The roper monster, a herd roper to be exact, was a psychic magic caster capable of gathering information through sensing the vibrations around it, which made him equally effective underground as he would be above ground. In addition to that, he could gather information using his skills and spells even without sight, making him suitable for keeping watch over the production processes of my items. Yes, my lord. I have tested your hypothesis on whether the yin-yang all-in-one printer could perform better with higher-grade magical stones and found that it was indeed correct. The enchantment can drain the mana necessary to cast the create item and copy spells, regardless of the preset template crystals currently being used, at a higher rate with higher-grade magic stones. My herdroper presented to me several duplicated 10,000 Valis coins, the highest denomination I had access to, and a stack of my personally drawn and colored manga volumes. As I was a law-abiding citizen, I wouldn't dream of flooding the economy with counterfeited money. Of course, I had no issues with using what was effectively free money to pay for Yggdrasil gold, as my gamer system considers it to be properly acquired legal tender. Figures that anything based on that imbalanced as fuck game will consider this method a feature rather than an exploit. As for the other items being created out of thin air, I found myself quite excited about it as, if it works out, I would be turning my newfound hobby of drawing, manga-styled, painting, and story writing into an effective career. I had initially just practiced my writing and drawing skills to better improve my ability to create magic scrolls and analyze magic circles, but I improved at such a quick pace that, thank you level bullshit, it became extremely rewarding and relaxing in equal measure. And so I went into fulfilling my dreams of becoming a mangaka. Granted, I had to compromise by structuring it so that it read left to right, to better suit the majority Western-like audience that dominated Orario. But I'd like to think it would be worth the trouble. While I had already created the first volume, completely colored by the way, I was planning to market my future release by including just the first chapter, together with my soon-to-be-published book. My, hopefully, future best-selling book is titled An Illustrated Guide to the Dungeon, The Upper Floors. It was a book that combined all the pertinent and interesting information regarding the dungeon and the monsters within those floors, together with colored maps and illustrations of the corridors from different POVs, detailed paintings of monsters with RPG-like stats and info detailed as if it was a D&D handbook. Essential prices, magic stones plus equipment, regulations, tips, and much, much more. Compared with the dozens of books and hours of lectures that a guild advisor might push you to study, well, honestly, this one book had everything you need to know, laid out in a beautifully colored, structured, and written manner. None of that dry reading material bullshit. I had pretty pictures, graphs, and a cute chibi mascot, Paimon, explaining everything in a manner that even the barely literate would be capable of grasping. And making copies for such a high-quality book can be done at practically no cost. Granted, actually testing and building a modular machine capable of processing and using those tier spells took a whole month to get right. But once I managed it, it was smooth sailing all the way. Of course, I couldn't let anyone get their hands on it, so I had the originals stored in my inventory and I was using modified copies with a self-destruction contingency. Boost magic, lesser break item, attached to the ones within my basement. That said, there was just one tiny, itty-bitty problem with my guide. I had no fucking information on the jackbird. I have been spamming my locate species, which worked similarly to my locate item spell, in that it always searches out the nearest matching object. I'm working on it. The practice seems to make it somewhat better, specifically on the jackbird based on what I knew about it every few hours throughout the day. It has been over 3 months, and I have either missed the jackbird spawning and getting killed during my sleep hours or casting intervals, or it is just that rare. I'm leaning toward the second option. Good work. Record your findings in the log book for your successor. I tell the herdroper as I started thinking about what I was going to do to the jackbird if I actually found it. Quite frankly, if I did find it and had gathered all the information I needed on it, then I wasn't going to just kill it. It would be a waste. I couldn't just duplicate and sell its drop item without reducing its prices in the market, nor I could actually use its weak floor one-sized magic stone for anything significant. Its body isn't strong enough, nor large enough, for me to work with either. Well, there is that option. If I do it in the monster pantry, then it should work out. Ah, it's time. May as well try again. Heh? What? Hallelujah. It's there. There is no way my shitty skill that would pick up the closest pigeon the moment I set its condition to bird would misdirect me after setting the search criteria to the first floor of the dungeon. I rushed towards the first floor of the dungeon in my full battle gear and my anti-detection protocols on me, then spammed my locate species skill until I got closer to its location, and finally, I found it, the jackbird, and I kidnapped it immediately and brought it to a monster pantry. It could do nothing but struggle in futility within my arms as I killed every weakling monster with a simple stomp. After that, I went ahead and used my various skills to get as much information from it as possible. Then I vivisected the monster, after using anesthesia and inducing magical sleep, alive to study its insides, quickly drew and wrote everything important into my notebook, then used the healing ability of my magic ring to close up its wounds. Now then, you're useless as you are, but what if I turned you into an enhanced species? I took out an infant dragon's, it's called a drake, magic stone, sliced it into several smaller pieces using a special knife, then force-fed the smaller monster. Most strengthened species were just bigger and badder versions of themselves who cannibalized magic stones of monsters around the same level and likely similar species, at least at the beginning. I wanted to see what would happen if I fed a weakest monster the magic stone of a completely different monster species with a much greater power level. I was using the hold species spell to keep its rapidly mutating body in place so that I can continue the process. When I was done with my last remaining infant dragon magic stone, I went on to silverback and orc magic stones. 15 minutes later, the jackbird mutated into a lump of hairy, scaly, and muscular flesh, and then it stopped moving for real. Oh no, please don't tell me it's dead after all that progress. I used one of my skills to check. It's still alive. But its heart is stopped and I don't think simple healing will cut it. As it was now, my only weakest, lightning, spell would kill it instantly so. I suppose I will have to try something new. I hadn't gotten around to trying this yet, but this is as good a time as any. First up, precautions. Triplet maximize magic, land mines. I had to trap the area in the event I succeed and the monster retaliates against me. Summon monster third. Keep watch on the area for me. I told my summoned moonlight wolf. Triplet magic, lesser magic seal. Triplet maximize penetrate magic, shock lance. I sealed a tripled metamagic enhanced version of my strongest lightning attack spell using lesser magic seal, so that I can release it instantly. After that, I spammed several of my buffing spells, starting with lesser full potential, which slightly increased all my stats and along with the limits of how much I can boost my stats using other buffs. Then I cast all those other buffs. After that, I used create item to instantly create a large stone floor with an empty two-layered magic circle pre-inscribed there. I placed the lump of flesh onto the middle of the circle, then used another instance of my magic rings, healing scales, to keep its HP up. Now, I started writing using a special language for the opposite meaning of the boost and maximize metamagic modifiers that appear when using certain magics that I had learned by activating the translate spell while holding a spell and its magic circle without releasing it. Then I modified the widen magic wording so that it would suit something like target magic. Instead, once that was done, I pushed what little connection I had to the lightning spell through the circle instead of simply manifesting it through my hands. The circle lit up and stayed that way for a few seconds before it sent a targeted shock of electricity, weakened as it was, to the heart of the jackbird's fleshy heap. Ryrach. It lives. I cheered as the living meatball continued to transform into its final form. I looked up the transformed jackbird using my lore skills and found myself amazed at its stats. Amazing, all the attack power and speed of an infant dragon, compressed to an even greater extent by the muscle power of those large silverbacks and orcs, followed by a huge increase in speed due to its natural bird physiology that specialized on running away. No, that hulking muscular behemoth of flesh, scales, and hair cannot be called a jackbird anymore. It can only be called the jacked bird. I almost didn't catch it. Its speed was so great that I almost missed its fist about to reach my face. But just because I could perceive it did not mean I could dodge it. My high levels provided my perception abilities that were far beyond that of the monsters of the higher floors. However, my actual speed, thanks to my wizard stats, lagged behind at around the fastest monsters of the higher floors. In terms of explosive speeds, I might be able to match a monster from the 19th to 24th floors, but in terms of actual combat speeds, I was sorely lacking. And so I ended up being a punching bag to the monster that was going full JoJo on me. Not that it was actually hurting me. There was still a level difference despite the increase in power. I had my best equipment and all my buffs activated. If I was a level 3 mage with no physical stats and only operated on fauna mechanics, then I might have died from the furious assault. Sadly for the jacked bird, I was a Yggdrasil character. Hold species. I froze it in place, then kicked it towards the land mines, which blew off a chunk of its back and sent it flying back toward me. I released the triple shock lances, stored in the magic seal, and blasted the enhanced monster until it looked like yesterday's dinner. That was informative. What is this really? Conditions met. Genomancer job class is now unlocked. Conditions met. High Sage job class is now unlocked. The first job was a happy surprise, no doubt about it. It seems my experiments with magical phenomena on that monster were sufficient for me to unlock it. The second job, however, I thought that the requirements might have something to do with either spell modification or creation, along with sharing or making use of gathered knowledge across multiple disciplines to suit the theme, and I was probably correct somewhere along that line of thinking. That said, I'm still going to publish my completed guidebook. Either way, it didn't matter for now. I got what I was looking for, along with a job that I did not know I needed until I learned that it specialized in creating and modifying monsters instead of just summoning them temporarily. I say this is cause for celebration. A big celebration in the best restaurant that isn't named Hostess of Fertility or anywhere near wherever Freya is right now. Chapter 6. After taking a nice long shower, I came to realize that I had been just a single level shy of getting access to the 6th tier spells, so I went ahead and assigned my unused levels to the High Sage job class, which gave me the most value out of all my unlocked classes thus far. On the side, I had also gained access to 2nd tier divine spells and 3rd tier spiritual spells, as the Sage series provided equivalent caster levels for the 3 main schools of magic, and Genomancer provided spiritual caster levels in addition to arcane caster levels, as I wasn't going to waste my free spell slots that could be spent on higher tier spells on that low tier, albeit useful, divine and spiritual spells. That left me with only one choice. I needed to unlearn spells that I did not need or will find very little use for in the future. The first spells to go would be lowest tier buffs, as I now had access to the higher tier buffs at the 5th and 6th tier. Next would be the detection spells that I could simply replace with my superior Discover Lore 3 skill, followed up by spells that I thought would be useful, but in reality, I never found the opportunity or the heart to actually use them. You may unlearn a spell from your spell list by paying Yggdrasil gold coins. The cost of unlearning a spell equals spell tier *100. Once again, I found myself with close to 0 currency. Yggdrasil currency, that is, as I spent nearly all my Yggdrasil gold reserves to unlearn several redundant or barely used 1 St to 3 road tier spells, like Rabbit's Foot, Lesser Mind Protection, Lesser Dexterity, Blur, Identify, and Disease. I replaced them with low-tier divine and spiritual spells that would be used more often. Divine spells like the Summon Angel series will be useful if I require a vaguely humanoid being to perform a task on the surface, whilst Light Healing, Cure, Poison, and Heavy Recover will always be useful as I dive deeper into the dungeon. Spiritual spells include illusion-type spells like Illusionary Script, which can be useful for carrying secret messages, protection from curses, and Remove Curse, which should allow me to deal with most of the local curses. And done. I filled in the last few pages set aside for the Jackbird entry in my guide to the upper floors. Extend Magic, Summon Angel 2nd. Good afternoon. I greeted the angel guardian that looked like he just came out of Minecraft. Fucking blocky angels, why can't you all just be pretty? Instead of setting for a compromise between humanoid and biblically accurate. Greetings, my lord. How may I serve? It always feels awkward whenever I hear titles like Lord and Lady in this city, as back on Earth, I only kept myself aware of some ways to address royals and lords. As part of my journey in understanding Asoya fanfics and alternate history stories, I never actually had to say them with my own mouth. For a moment, I thought back to the first time I laid my eyes on that goddess. Okay, I would admittedly have no trouble addressing certain individuals as Lady if I feel they deserve it, which narrows it down to Astrea, Hephaestus, Demeter, Brigid, and Peenia. I handed it my draft for the Jackbird entry and said, bring this to whichever. Summon is currently on rotation in the hidden basement. Read and discuss it with my summon, and write down your feedback on how it can be improved and if there are any discrepancies, like writing style inconsistencies. After showing it the way, I decided to spend my recovered mana on placing some actual protections onto my home. I guess I will start with this. Placing my hands on the floor, I focused on the entirety of the area that constituted my home, and chanted anti-information protection, followed by impermanency, which had an EXP cost to the spell depending on the tier of the spell I wanted to make permanent. Thankfully, the EXP costs for a 5th tier spell were not particularly significant. I still had plenty left over to maintain my current level after making the anti-information spell a permanent addition to my home's defenses. My next use of permanency would require a few more steps of setup. Counter Detect. First up, I cast the 6th tier spell, Counter Detect, on myself, which will allow me to detect and instantly respond to a predetermined condition, the response of which would also have to be set up in advance. In the game, I could imagine that this would involve selecting from a fixed selection of conditions. Some examples could be along the lines of, if the user is targeted by information magic, then release spell stored in magic seal at enemy caster. Triplet magic, magic seal. Anti-information protection. False data, mana. Mislead. I stored the spells that disguised and faked my data in that order into the 3. Magic seal, S, which was then installed into my Counter Detect spell. If I just settled with anti-information protection, then anyone who SCRY'd me would simply get a blank, which would attract even more attention. False data, mana, would be sufficient to make a show of me having an average soul. Hopefully, my only reference was copying a civilian's mana capacity, which was basically 0, in the event that Freya looks at me, and the mislead spell would instantly create a controllable illusory double where I'm standing while rendering me invisible, giving me time to make my double retreat to my warded home while I escape to my backup hideaways myself to let the heat die down and for my defenses to recharge. Permanency. I felt a wave of exhaustion as I expended over 80% of my total MP in a small chunk of EXP in a short period of time. Well, if I keep picking the good caster classes, then I should be able to get a lot of MP and the right skills to cast spells even more efficiently in the future. Catnap. When I woke up from my magically induced 10-minute nap, which only worked once per day, which counted as a short rest apparently, I had recovered just over half my total MP. If I had money to waste, then I could have used a diluted mind potion and boosted my MP regen, which would have allowed me to recover all my mana with a single use of catnap. However, I was celebrating today and had no need for a full mana pool, just enough not to feel lethargic. Hence there was no reason to waste good money on additional MP that I did not necessarily need right now, instead of a dungeon run, where I needed to keep myself in top shape where possible. Sometime later, the angel and my summoned shadow demon, that's right, I have. One of them managed the production process on Fridays, came up to me with 2 pages of feedback each. I thanked them sincerely for their efforts and reassigned them to some more enjoyable tasks before their summoning duration came to an end. For the shadow demon, I had him go on a stalking spree to collect the latest gossip. As for the angel guardian, I used an illusion spell on it to disguise it as a human, cast anti-information protection, and false data, mana, on it, then had it drag a wagon containing a huge wooden crate to my destination. It was time to revisit one of the restaurants which I scouted all those months back. This one was quite special as the old man, a butcher-turned-professional chef, made the best sausages in Orario. His secret: back in the day, when the Zeus and Hera Familia were still around, he taught a certain Zeus Familia member his butchery techniques and cooking know-how. In return, the male adventurer occasionally would drop an orc corpse into his kitchen on the way up the dungeon, which would then be processed in various meat dishes, like his famous special sausages. Sadly, he would never serve his special sausages ever again, as the adventurers of the post-Zeus and Hera Orario were uncultured as fuck and did not want to forego a bit of income by carrying an orc's intact corpse to the surface in order to enjoy a better dining experience. Good evening, Heinz. I was somewhat acquainted with the old man regardless of that, as his meat dishes were still top-notched and worth the price, which made me frequent the place even as I worked at a high-class restaurant. The old man grunted at the back, then replied, "How many sausages this time?" "Depends on what you can do with this." I beckoned him out to the front of his restaurant, where the wagon dragged by my summoned help was located, and gave him a peek of its content. "What the? You killed that and brought it all the way up? That doesn't make sense. I am just a simple faunaless man trying to make my way in Orario. Obviously, I would have paid an adventurer or two to get this for me, and have it delivered like this. Whatever you say." The old man rolled his eyes, clearly not believing me despite all my efforts and precautions taken to disguise my true actions. Well, some people just have impressions and beliefs that will stick with them, despite hard evidence pointing to the contrary, so I can't be bothered to argue with him. After all, I wasn't paying for him to believe me. I was paying him to turn my orc corpse into monster sausage as a treat to myself. I had to pay less than I thought, however, as we ended up working out a deal where he would get to process and store some of the meat in exchange for cooking the rest of it for me at minimal service charges. "How much of it do you want to be cooked now and kept for later?" Just cook all of my portions right now. I'm celebrating." Fine with me." "Wait, are you seriously eating all of that? Yourself? How about the others?" "What others?" "It wouldn't be much of a celebration if I had to waste my energy chatting with other people." He looked at me weirdly before shrugging, muttering weirdo adventurers under his breath. "Well, so long as he isn't going to psychoanalyze me, then I'm not going to make a fuss about it." I enjoyed the rest of my night stuffing myself with the most delicious sausages I have ever eaten in my entire life. All alone, as always. 1.5 months later. Trying to keep up the pretense of a mysterious mage that invented a new printing process that could copy entire books in color cheaply was a lot more troublesome than I thought. My meeting with the head of the guild, the fat elf Royman Mardial, went pretty smoothly in spite of his stress-induced attitude. My explanations about how I had collaborated with adventurers, an artist that wishes to remain anonymous, a mage, from outside of Orario, and used information from the guild in order to help write my book were accepted without too much fuss aside from the mage issue. In the end, I managed to sell him on the idea using graphs and charts, giving revenue projections on how more level 1s becoming more informed and dying less would correlate to an increase in magic stones turned in over the long run, which would get the guild, and himself, more money. Right now, the guild would get exclusive rights to sell my books and the new guidebooks after that, for 3 months before I could sign on with different publishers, like independent bookstores. The head of the guild, under Uranos, was extremely happy when my books were sold out consistently over the first 2 weeks. I was happy with that too, as I was getting a lot of EXP from my quest for it. But what I wasn't happy about was having barely any time to experiment and grind in the dungeon, as I had to spend most of the magic stones and my time on the mass production process, copying, of my fully colored book. I was delivering around 500 books per day, which was more than what most could manage with the current technology levels, that is, if you counted uncolored books. Furthermore, I had to teleport my disguised summons along with my book stocks out of Orario, so that they could register and leave at the entrance like normal people, just to keep up the pretense. Damn it all. I'm going to need to spend a few months scaling up before releasing the next book. I will have to buy a large piece of land or a huge mansion. The more space I have to work with, the more printers I can make and manage to scale up production of both Yggdrasil gold fodder and other goods. Thankfully, with well over 20,000 books sold despite the high prices, it was fully colored, hence valued much greater, even if I tried to lower the price to keep it affordable. I had enough money to buy a dozen good homes, twice over, at minimum. From what Rose had told me, practically every adventurer, mostly level 1s, although a lot of higher-leveled ones still bought them for reasons, had one of my books, or at least shared one with a fellow newbie familiar member for the time being, until they could afford one of their own. The manga chapter that I placed at the back of the book was also well received, based on the feedback box placed in the guild just for the purposes of collecting the thoughts of my readers. A limited release run, book signing event. Rose sighed and elaborated without holding back. The fattest wants you to draw a special edition cover and some extra bits for your first volume. Make it a real limited edition thing, then sell the first 1,000 at a premiere event or some crap. I can already see where this is going. Hold on. Rose, you forgot that I'm just the author. The artist, my partner, doesn't like interacting with people and wouldn't agree to this event. He won't want to waste time shaking strangers' hands. If he won't do that, he wouldn't bother with an extra cover and bonus materials either. The werewolf stared blankly at me, then said, I figured you would say that. Leonard, for the record, I meant what I said, and Royman doesn't know. Hey, you make sketches during your time in the guild library. I even caught you drafting a few storyboards near closing time. Ugh, weeks of clandestine actions, wasted. Huh, and did Royman tell you to pressure me with this information? Did you hear what I said? I told you that he doesn't know. Ah, I see, she didn't rat me out. Heh. This is a strange feeling. Hey, thank you, Rose. It's nothing. She glanced away, seemingly embarrassed at getting thanked for something so little, or at least, that is what I'm assuming, as I occasionally get like that. I really appreciate it, Rose. Thank you. I repeated my words clearly with a smile to make sure she understood just how much it meant to me. All this time, I had been alone in this world, with no one that I can trust other than myself. Even though this wasn't one of my deepest, darkest secrets, it still felt good to know that there were some people, someone, that wasn't willing to sell me out for a promotion or other benefits. That said, I felt a little bad for embarrassing her to the point where her cheeks were starting to match the color of her hair, so I quickly came up with a way to make it up to her. Hey, Rose. What is it? Do you like to eat sausages? What? I mean, gourmet sausages. I know this place that makes the best sausages in the world. I was just rambling on at this point since it looked like she was mad. Hell, even Zold of all people used to eat there back in the day. The rumors of him being a picky eater is very true. I did my research, you see, and this restaurant was actually recommended by the guy so dash. Conditions met. Elder Sage job class is now unlocked. Hey, that was weird. Did I somehow get the job class by selling enough books or something? Considering that I haven't created a new spell in a while, I had probably just reached some kind of lore propagation quota. I'll sort that out later. I have to focus on trying to treat what might be my first real friend in this world to a dining experience that will change her life and, hopefully, convert her into becoming a foodie like myself. Chapter 7. 1 month later. I did not have much time to spend gathering resources to improve my equipment, using my upgraded crafting and enchanting skills with how busy my schedule has been lately. Moving to the middle floors will provide me with higher quality materials. That much was obvious. My main excuse to put it off revolved around me not feeling ready to tackle the massive enemy combat speed increase, which might allow any one monster to get a lucky hit at my soft bits, specifically my eyes, and instant kill me. I wasn't an undead, so I would still take massive damage if my eyes were targeted. I could only hope my combat visor, which was created using Gray to create item, and further enchanted with my best physical resistance effects, e.g. anti-blunt, pierce, and slash damage, would be enough to keep me alive, regardless of my fear of instantly dying to an Almirage performing a jumping charge and killing me with a horn through the eye and brain. I simply did not have many good reasons to delay my progression any further. Killing stronger monsters and working with better materials were the only way for me to scale up efficiently and potentially unlock better job classes. And I was fresh out of good job classes now that I have assigned 5 levels into Elder Sage, maxing the rare or prestige job classes, which got me a significant status bonus along with nice skills and allowed me to access tier 7 spells. Greater teleportation was my favorite, as I could just teleport into anywhere I have previously visited in the dungeon without the risk of failure that came with its 5th tier counterpart. With the spell, I skipped all the way to the stairways that would lead down to the 13th floor. I wasn't sure how strong I was relative to the monsters at the middle floors. considering that there was supposed to be a big jump in power between them and the monsters from the floors above them. Naturally, the most cautious thing I could do was to start up with my strongest spell, then scale it down until I found the right amount of force needed to kill everything with minimal energy expenditure. Maximize magic, chain dragon lightning. Dragon-shaped lightning jumps from one target to another, disintegrating anything it touches. The hellhounds didn't stand a chance. Neither did the almirage, wyverns, crystal mantises, lamia mormos and dungeon worms. That single spell cast saw to that when it just kept jumping to the next target. Like, holy shit, this spell is fucking broken. So long as there is a nearby target, the lightning will continue on and bounce toward it. The ordinary D&D chain lightning spell had an extra target limit of 3 if it was cast at its original level. This iteration of chain lightning is, the only thing I can say is that the shitty developers did not balance their copy of the spell at all. The only thing preventing me from using it as a monster pantry clearing spell is the fact that it turns all my would-be corpses into ashes. The weaker 5th tier version, Dragon Lightning, would at least leave me with an intact corpse. Granted, it would be a corpse so charred that you would think it was the aftermath of letting Raiden EI into the kitchen. Anyways, as there was nothing left behind other than ashes, I decided to make my way toward the monster pantry before testing any of my other spells. An hour later, I was right back to punching monsters to death. I might be just a little bit overleveled for this area. Well, the combat speed jump was still considerable, as in 1 of our every 100. Monsters could dodge an attack from me if they were focused on escaping. It would probably be a different story if I hadn't placed 5 levels into Elder Sage. Anyways, time to get to work. I have around 4 hours to grind and experiment. Rose and I were planning to try out a particular street store in the southwest parts of Orario for breakfast as part of our in-city food tourism endeavors. The both of us had to start our day much earlier than usual so that Rose can get to work on time. After breakfast this time around. Such is the cost of good food. I still remember the times when my parents and I would wake up early and drive to a certain area just to eat the most authentic Sarawak laksa noodles that we were aware of after a lot of experiences with the dish before the hour-long queue would form just to satisfy our cravings. Of course, making time to partake in good food wouldn't be so costly, time-wise, if we had enough money to just work on our own schedule or work less instead of, working corporate hours. Self-employment or business ownership, where the day-to-day drudgery can be delegated, was the way to go if you ever wanted to work to live instead of living to work. If I made enough money and created a sustainable business model that did not rely on obscene amounts of magic use, then I would just give Rose a job as my assistant, or whatever role she was best suited for in my own company, and have her work half shifts with a summoned doppelganger or something. That way, my friend and I would be a lot better off. But for that to work out, I will need a business plan with a unique selling proposition that can be achieved with automated magical processes, at most. Also, the right composition of data to make lots of doppelganger mercenary contracts to fill up my workforce if I ever unlock that summon. I had a few business ideas in mind, although I will need to conduct several assessment practices that consultants usually would use to refine them. As for the latter, the most I have achieved is a mercenary contract for a shadow demon. It did not take too much experimentation to make it work as I expected it to. I had actually stumbled upon the workaround while I was fucking around with a War Shadow Magic Crystal, a reversed, full potential prototype spell circle, and my summoned shadow demon accidentally walked into it while I was testing the thing. Suddenly, I had a magic circle that performed a temporary level drain on my summon. Specifically, the magic crystal managed to store a semblance of a racial job level within it. I did not have much time before the effects wore off. I was frantic and I drained the magic power off other War Shadow crystals into the thing in an attempt to extend the effect's duration. Instead of simply extending it, the temporary job level had gone up to a maximum of level 10 until my loyal summon suggested that I activate the magic circle again, and donated another level, adding its more advanced racial class level and a single job level for its rogue build into the crystal. A few more magic crystal sacrifices, chucking an unused Drakehide scroll at it, and using my Enchant V skill head somehow resulted in a functioning mercenary contract for a shadow demon. Was the journey extremely educational? Yes. Did I make great use of a permanent shadow demon summon? No. Why not? My account has less than 100 Yggdrasil gold coins. The cost to summon a shadow demon was 4,500 Yggdrasil gold coins, which, at the previous rate of production, assuming the printers weren't used for books, would require running the magic items for nearly 20 days non-stop. Just thinking about it makes me want to punch my pillow in frustration. I was shaken out of my thoughts during the routine checkup of my corpse's DNA strands, using my genomancer skill, examine genome, which functioned similarly to high-tier mind and information-related spells like control amnesia, and my high-tier versions of discover lore. Meaning, there was a fuck ton of data that was very difficult to make sense of. It was a skill that would take lots of practice, like how Momonga went from wasting all his mana to change memories that were only a handful of minutes long, to being efficient enough to search through Zesh's mind for the right information and even change NPC settings to an extent. The Discover Lore series was difficult enough to handle when it stopped giving pure text information and started bombarding me with information as if I was Esper with powerful psychometry. Examine genome, on the other hand, for someone whose science grades were average at best, I was literally a % off an A at my high school finals. Had me look through the DNA of a lifeform's body and think, wow, I feel like a trash-tier mortal trying to understand Xianxia cultivation techniques. So far, there were only two things I have understood through copious amounts of genome recordings. The first of which was what determined sexual characteristics. For monsters and humans, just me. The second part was the bits that determined a monster's concentration of magic circulating through its body. The strand is far longer and stable compared to its peers by far. If I am correct. I plucked the magic stone out of the hellhound. Its corpse turned into dust, leaving only its blood on my gloves and a single fang behind. As I thought, it's no wonder that drop items function like free gacha rates. All monsters are not created equal. Insert Charles Z. Britannia speech here and replace them with monster characteristics. I snickered to myself and started writing my findings into my notebook. There was definitely a degree of randomization when it came to the creation of monsters. The ones that were at the top percentile in terms of magic capacity for passively reinforcing their body with magical energy provided by their magic stone, compared to their peers, were pretty much guaranteed to provide a drop item. Only monsters with a little bit more magical power could afford to leave behind a piece of themselves. Why did they do it? Was it because they could potentially revive themselves from it if sufficient magical power was provided, like what happened to the behemoth in that Dan Memo story? Is this the will of the dungeon? What is the true purpose of this phenomenon? Beyond the meta reason of the author forcing RPG mechanics into the world building, I'm not sure I can ever answer that question. But what I can do is find out how to game the system. Aside from the drop item, which was significantly better material than the counterparts that were carved up while keeping the magic stone in place, there was another thing that the monsters left behind even after the magic stone was removed. All monsters that had blood left their blood behind if it was spilled before the removal of their magic stone. There was power in blood. More specifically, the magic concentration in the blood of monsters was much higher than anywhere else in the body, aside from the parts that made up their drop items. I could also make more use of a monster corpse by draining the blood from their corpse and using it to charge up some levels in my job crystals before resorting to using the magic stone. If I wanted to start yet another factory to produce a new magic item, then I would need property outside of Orario. I can't imagine that anyone will be happy to know that there was a facility in the city draining monsters of their blood for purposes other than getting the meat halal or kosher certification. Yeah, best to keep such operations outside of Orario. I should read up more about Orario's borders. If I can find a place with good natural borders or obstructions, then I could potentially even set up a farm in order to breed certain monster species like blue peciuliors for their healing scales or drakes and dragons for their, well, everything. I always did fantasize about living an idyllic farm life spent in a peaceful village. If it worked like Harvest Moon, Rune Factory, and Stardew Valley, that is, MNN, that peaceful like is kind of far off, like, I can only afford to set it up after I Kill the OEBD and whatever the promised time is supposed to be about. Speaking of promised time, I really do need to get going and freshen up. A few hours later. Get home, shower, sort out my summons, cast my upgraded protections, e.g. Greater Mind Protection. Put on my Ring of Major Recuperation, that cuts down my long rest time to 2 hours, then wake up and meet up with Rose. I found it somewhat ironic that I was working myself like crazy just so that I can enjoy slow life moments like this with people I can actually enjoy spending time with. Hey, Leonard. I'm not late, am I? Wha? Rose yawned just after she popped by our designated meetup spot. Good morning to you too, Rose. Did you skip your cup of coffee this morning? As if I can afford to drink coffee every day. Besides, didn't you say something like caffeinated drinks being addictive? You would be surprised at how many addictive substances people would take every day despite knowing it's bad in the long run. Alcohol and drugs provide the most visible examples, but in reality, things like sugar and caffeine are also addictive. Incidentally, I am completely addicted to very sweet and thick coffee and chocolate malt drinks. I stopped myself from elaborating on my home world brands. Once again, I got too carried away when talking about myself in an attempt to engage others in conversation. I suppose that came hand in hand with having an extremely small circle of friends and a habit of trying to max out our catch-up time, because I was very bad at taking the initiative to meet up regularly. Rose seemed to be committing my words to memory, or she simply did not know what to say, before finally replying me, I will keep a lookout for those drinks, I guess. More importantly, shouldn't we get a move on? Oh right, we should. Come on, we're heading towards the market area, just between where most of the foreign traders and the adventurers ply their wares. Fair warning, it's going to be crowded even though it's still early, so stick close to me. Rose acknowledged my words with a nod. Then she latched onto my right arm. Oh wow, that feels nice. Wait, she's half my age. I should be smarter than this. If you're going to do this, and some moralizing Ganesha Famelia member or a salty god starts calling me a pedo out of nowhere, then I'm counting on you to say that I'm your adopted older brother. She wasn't quite as comfortable with me during our first step as foodie buddies. However, she had thankfully loosened up greatly after a week of gallivanting around Orario to try out food spots with me. She rolled her eyes, kicked my shin lightly, and then started dragging me along. Let's just go. I swear, your homeland is weird. Excuse me, the laws of my old world are weird. As true as that might be, this city doesn't have any laws against children under the age of 12 risking their lives as overglorified fuel, magic stone, miners. Quite frankly, the laws of both our homelands are equally baffling. Eventually, we made it to an open-air cafe. The street stall was on wheels, which reminded me of a food truck, and ordered some coffee and breakfast. As I was aware of Rose's current income situation, I had insisted on paying for everything this time around. I'm well off enough to be a sugar daddy, so why not? As I always did with the more upmarket cuisine. My law skill helpfully made the connection between the dish I ordered and my Earth-equivalent dish, which was Swiss rosti with smoked salmon. Granted, the Damachi variant used a different kind of fish, but the salty, crispy, moist, freshly fried rosti, hash brown, was still the same as what I would expect. Granted, my expectations were solely based on a singular experience when visiting my cousins in Switzerland when I was very young, so I couldn't actually make a 100% accurate comparison. This is really good. Right now, I did not care over much about that, since the food was genuinely good. How is it, Rose? I turned to look at my fellow foodie and found her looking at me awkwardly with her cheeks stuffed with food and crumbs of fried potato around her lips. She gave me a thumbs up. Want another? Rose shook her head and tapped my left wrist, more specifically, the copy of my old mechanical watch. Good point. You are running a bit late. Rose finally finished chewing and bravely took a large sip of her coffee. Aha, that was good. And I wasn't talking about me. The book signing is today. Remember? Ah yes. I had taken the time to explain and correct Royman on how and why book signings should be done using what I knew from my world, namely, I had to make sure he understood this wasn't about his profits and that, as I was just the writer and not the artist, it would not be right for me to do a book signing for a manga event. Luckily, I had a light novel nearly ready for launch, which consisted of a lot of extra scenes and information that could not fit into the manga format. The things I do for money and the chance to escape the rat race. Hey, I thought I was forgetting something. Ah well, I already have everything prepared, although I haven't rehearsed my lines. You'll be fine, probably. Just don't be surprised if someone tries to confess to you and ask you out. But why would someone ask me on a date just like that? At a book signing of all places. I could understand it somewhat if it happened in my old waiter job as people. Hitting on waitresses was kind of a cliché, so the opposite gender situation should also apply. But a book signing? I'm just a nerdy writer answering questions from perspective. Book buyers on the story, my process on writing, and maybe a few questions about my life on how I came up with the setting. Who would ask me out during such an event? Rose simply patted my back with a pitying look without explaining further. Why do I get the feeling that things are going to get more complicated? Chapter 8. One step at a time. There's no need to rush Tilda. After finishing that old song on repeat, I finally managed to calm my nerves for the book signing event. There is no need to rush, I reminded myself, as I had already extensively prepared for the event since publishing the next manga volume and new light novel adaptation of the story. I was the type of person to over-prepare for any activity where possible. There was little that I did not prepare for. Even the possible scrutiny by the guild and various busybody familiars had been something I had accounted for back then when I was using my I teleport spell and loyal summons to put up a legitimate front of a proper supply line. Although looking back at my lifestyle on Earth, I could safely say that it was a habit that was only developed the moment I arrived in this new world just over 7 months ago. To think that I would be taking up my mother's perfectionist tendencies out of necessity. I chuckled a bit at the thought of how her past complaints about me being more like my father didn't age very well. Has everything gone according to plan? I spoke through the telepathic bond that existed between me and my summons. I winced a bit when a cacophony of noise erupted. Drat, must have set it on reply. All, instead of just sending the same message sequentially with a small delay between each summon. Thankfully, my improved mind, as a result of levels, job class corrections, and a few unknown factors, was capable of powerful recall, so it only took me a while to dissect the individual messages and confirm that everything is proceeding well. Enough. I sent a message telling my summons to make a slow exit while I made my way to the guild, which was holding the book signing event within their library. Once that was done, I retrieved a small box containing one of my magic rings. More specifically, it was a ring made specifically to interact with Freya with little to no risk. Its main enchantment was the inverse of my Sensor Boost spell, as the spell does exactly what it says in the title. The inverted spell that formed the main enchantment of the ring would cut the wearer off from all 5 senses. While I objectively did not find Freya's form to be as pleasing when compared to Astrea, I wasn't going to risk my mind being infected by this universe's possible mimetic ideas of what constituted perfection and beauty. I mean, this is the universe that judged Hephaestus as one of my best goddesses. Here, little facial defect as something more horrifying than the ugliest monsters in the dungeon. Just like how the new world in Overlord had shit taste in monster design, who the fuck would see Hamsaki as intimidating? It's possible that this universe had questionable standards for feminine and sensual beauty. The best way for me to prevent myself from being tainted by possible mimetic hazards like that would be to cut myself off from the world entirely, but that was not really going to happen. So instead, I would simply not allow myself to perceive Freya in any way that matters. The ring would not allow me to see her, nor can I hear her sexy voice. I would not be able to feel her touch, nor can I smell or taste any part of her in any manner. In order to not give off the impression that I was ignoring her, on the off chance she did interact with me, I created a modified translate spell that functioned as a speech-to-text program that would read out the words being spoken to and around me while providing me other details to identify the speaker, and added it to the magic ring. Of course, not having a sense of touch could potentially fuck my body control, so I attached a mislead spell that would render me invisible and form an illusionary body at my last location, and if I was sitting down, it would form right over me, that I could control to speak and move in my stead. I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I? I sighed and swiped my hair up, forcing me to readjust my glasses slightly right after. Objectively speaking, there is little chance a goddess like her is going to waste her time on some obscure author's signing event. With how busy adventurers and civilians are on a working day, I wouldn't be surprised if no one would come to the event. Just thinking about the book signing event brought me back to a few online articles that I had read on a whim when I wanted to find out about this particular kind of event. I vaguely remembered the writer talking about their own upsetting experience of having close to no one attending their event, feeling bad about wasting the bookstore owner's time, a little humiliated, etc. I was not immune to the fear of failure. Heck, I was probably the most susceptible to that, given that I had always been risk-averse due to how pervasive the fear of being incorrect was throughout my life. Well, at least I can take solace in the fact that even best-selling authors can occasionally get no-shows for their book signing events. I remembered something about a famous author of horror stories mentioning how his sole customer at a particular event was some fat kid that asked about Nazi books. Well, it would be pretty funny if some edgy, shader-looking bastard came in asking for books on Everless or something. Greater teleportation. I teleported to a secret place near the back of the guild's building that was being guarded by one of my summons, until I had an extensive permanent spy network, or efficient divination spells. This workaround for ensuring a potential teleport spot wasn't watched would just have to do. I snuck my way through the back door and into the library room, which was currently locked for security reasons after my summons left the premises. I tapped on Rose's shoulder. "Hey, Rose." "What?" She screamed in fright and jumped away from me, lost in thought. "You asshole. Don't sneak up on me like that." "You call that sneaking? Is this the part where I talk about superior werewolf senses? I don't even have a single level in a rogue-type class. This isn't Skyrim. Things like crouching and not wearing heavy armor do not count toward actually being sneaky. You have a magic item that erases your scent, which does not muffle my footsteps along with it." Rose huffed, gave a glance towards the main entrance, and finally admitted what she was pondering about so intensely just now. "I was worried that you would have gotten found out by the crowd and held up, among other things." I winced a little at the thought. Yeah, getting stuck within a crowd will never be a pleasant experience unless you're a JK with a fetish for getting molested. Hold up. What was that about a crowd? I came by the back in trance. I figured you might want to wait inside, then brace yourself. All right. Oh, and thanks for thinking about me earlier. Jay, just get in. I walked past the few queue line bands set up alongside the boards and banners promoting the event, then slipped inside the now unlocked library. There was a stack of books, manga volumes, and light novels on the side, with some of them placed on wire book stands that I created for display purposes. The long table was covered with a tablecloth, which helped hide the boxes of additional goodies and materials underneath. All the stuff I needed, like pens, a notepad, business cards, and some freebies like postcards, were on top of the table. I also had one of a piano moved into the room. My excuse was that I might want to play a few songs while explaining to the people what kind of music was going on in my head while I was writing a particular scene. Standard author questions. The more genuine reason was that I just needed a potential time-wasting activity in case there weren't a lot of people, or if I needed a filler for when things had gotten awkward. Also, I thought my piano just made the room look more sophisticated and cooler than it should be. I had large posters and banners of the main characters for my series. Of course, the female lead and mascot goddess of my story was displayed more prominently for good reason. There was also the lewder poster-sized illustration of the female lead prepared for those that pay for the limited edition light novel, but that was hidden. I just had to take note of it, since an adventurer with heightened senses or odd perception skills could notice them beforehand. The poor main male character was somewhat shafted despite having most of the POV at the start of the story. Well, I'll give it a while. Once I let him level up in the story, I can give him a makeover, just like how Sung Jinwoo went from cute to badass. For now, I'll need his relatively cute appearance intact so that I can make his suffering even more visceral and painful to the readers. The shock factor was the main hook, after all, for this totally fictional story about a wide-eyed newbie adventurer meeting a cute goddess and female elf, only to get embroiled in the fucked-up circumstances of the city and dungeon, end up brutally murdered in his first day and waking up back at the start of his adventure. Yes, it is basically a more action-packed version of Read Zero. I packed the characters with lots of history, depth, and mystery, set in Orario with solo leveling and OPM tier art for fight scenes, manga version. As it also involved familiars, and I did not want any problems caused by me name dropping actual deities here, I had to question a couple of gods and goddesses under various guises to discover which deities existed in this universe and which did not, in order to keep things inoffensive. Let's see, my raffle basket, people love free stuff, should be secure enough to prevent some sneaky palum. Oh dear, am I adopting the Orario civilian racist stereotyping from making off with more than their fair share? That said, perhaps I overdid it a little with the cookie dispenser. I swear, my snack dispenser looks more durable than the equipment I had for the free gifts. I prepared nearly 1,000 chocolate cookies last week and preserved them using magic just for the event. They were all baked while utilizing my wealth of knowledge skill, which allowed me to gain the abilities, with random skills and no basic stat increases, of unlocked job classes that I did not have levels in for a single hour a day, can use twice a day, to ensure that nothing went wrong with the cooking process. A super chef was good for things like that. That said, I had to dial down the stat bonuses granted by the food Yggdrasil cooked food grants buff to 0 so that I wouldn't raise any suspicions. On the bright side, doing so allowed me to maximize the taste of the food in return. Best cookies I had in my life. The guild would be assigning me 5 staff members, Rose included, to help manage the crowd, sales and payments, rationing of the cookies, limited coupons, raffle prizes and distribution, and so on and so forth. Which reminds me, aren't they supposed to come in by now? I would like to take some time to brief them further on a few things that my summons may not have covered earlier. Might as well go check up on them from the safety of this library. Silent boost magic, sensor boost. Silent widen boost magic, see through. The combination of spells would boost the distance I could see clearly by a tremendous degree and also allow me to see through layers of material as if I had Superman's X-ray vision. Of course, I would be perfectly gentlemanly with my use of the spells, if only so that an overly horny teenager somewhere in the multiverse would never be able to accuse me of being a party to such a thing. I would never be able to live it down if I did something that made me comparable to perverts like Mineta and Issei. I stared past the walls for a while, mentally counting the hundreds of adventurers and civilians alike, lining up outside the guild's building until opening hours, that coincided with the opening of my event. Well, I'm sure most of them are there for early morning administrative affairs. With the guild, yeah, that's it. I'm just going to play Moonlight Sonata on the piano until the people come in to take my mind of things. A perfectly normal day in Orario, mostly Rose POV. There won't be a stampede situation, alright. Don't be silly. It's not an attack by Evolus or anything like that. What do we do if the gods there get unruly? You mean when, not if, they behave unseemlily? Oh come on, you get what I mean. Just send them to the back of the line or threaten them with fines dash. Rose tiptoed to get a better look at the crowds over the bodies of her colleagues that were crowding around the window with worried expressions. For a moment, she thought she was hallucinating. She quickly took a deep breath and told herself to keep calm and focus on what was real. Unfortunately for her, the crowd that numbered over 1,000 beings right outside the doorstep was not a hallucination. It is, in fact, very real. And here she thought that today would be a normal day. Obviously, with a special event being held, it would be a bit busier than the norm. But she did not expect anything out of the ordinary. On second thought, that was kind of silly. She had started her day off by making Leonard a little more aware of the fact that she was a woman. She was an eligible maiden the moment she started working a year ago. Why is she still getting treated like a child? Had a date fantastic breakfast and a cup of coffee together with him, then was delayed on the way to her workplace by a male god getting mugged in broad daylight, followed by some shady fellows cornering a woman in an alleyway. She did not need to take action as those little girls from Estrella's famelia happened to resolve the situation, and walking past a murder incident. They were all ordinary incidents that one would expect from a lonely pure maiden living in Orario, much like herself. However, she was starting to think that there was a worrying abnormal trend in her life. "Rose, are you okay?" "Why, yeah, I just remembered something." In hindsight, the ever-worsening state of Orario's public order was a lot more obvious on days when she meets up with Leonard. It's not as if she wasn't aware of the lawlessness of her home city that rises to the foreground whenever the presence of the Zeus and Hera familiars could not be felt. 3 years ago, just the day after the Zeus and Hera familia left Orario to complete the 3 grand quests, the Everless and the majority of criminal scum within the city. Walls had ramped up their activities and caused chaos everywhere. Rose could still remember how she and her mother had to barricade their own home for safety and only leave for the bare essentials on the worst days. Mother and most of the people she heard from had blamed Zeus, Hera, and anyone else that left Orario just to kill some big monsters instead of protecting the city. And when they came back, unsuccessful in their quest and wiped out to almost the last member, the ones that were still alive were critically injured or half dead. The people's anger had been pointed towards them. It was only after joining the guild and getting access to their records that Rose discovered that their banishment was pretty much a way to get them out of the city safely. At least, that was the case for the Loki, Ganesha, and Hephaestus, familia who did not want the last members dead. Supposedly, Freya simply wanted revenge for Hera's slights against her. Her senior manager had once suggested the idea that the goddess might have joined up with the other familiars that wanted to kill them all, a level 7 and a few dying level. June 7th would still be dangerous for any single familiar to attempt it, if Finn Dimna hadn't gotten them out of the city first. Despite all that, Rose had never personally witnessed or was personally affected by the tragedies of the time beyond some major inconveniences. Even after starting work with the guild, her tragedies were mostly centered upon her non-existent love life and the deaths of adventurers that she made the mistake of actually caring about. Every other day, she would hear about some attack by Everless, a girl going missing, and likely sold to slavery in some form, a murder, a theft, and so on and so forth. Until recently, she never had any of these incidents happening so close to her or right in front of her eyes. If she had 100 Valis for every crime or tragedy that was taking place right within her vicinity, then she would have 1,800 Valis. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that she had those encounters on the days when she had met up with Leonard. "Everyone, let's do our best today." Rose was startled out of her thoughts as her senior manager's enthused declaration rang out. "Well, no point thinking about it right now. It's probably just a coincidence." Rose quickly got back to her workstation, which for today was the guild's library, as she was, predictably, assigned by her boss to assist Leonard. Her wolf ears perked up as they picked up a dreamlike tune. Is Leonard playing the piano that was moved inside? She had first thought that he would be hiring a musician, but since no one else had come in through the back door, it could only have been Leonard playing the instrument inside. If it were a month ago, she would have been shocked by Leonard's surprising talents. But after spending time with him, she came to realize that he had plenty of skills that he still kept to himself. Unlike most people, adventurers included, Leonard wasn't the type to brag. As expected of Leonard, she muttered one of the few phrases that did not trigger her friend's humble deflection of genuine praise. Simply accepting the fact that he was extremely capable was also her way to rationalize things and minimize the damage to her worldview. Otherwise, she would be thinking things like, why aren't all the deities just as talented as him? The next step after admiration would be reverence, which can be dangerous. She might end up going overboard and fawn over him like the devotees of Freya and Aphrodite, wearing nothing but thin clothes, a dog collar around her neck attached to a chain leash dash. Rose slapped herself and shuddered briefly at the sudden image that her mind conjured up. What the hell is wrong with her? Why is she imagining all these things all of a sudden? She was supposed to be a professional. Right, I shouldn't be just standing here. I have to actually walk in and... Shush. Shut up, Rose. Maybe he isn't so plain after all. Oh gods, I didn't think he was so, Rose found 4 of her colleagues blocking the open door to the library, listening to Leonard's music piece while admiring him from afar. At least I'm not the only one. She muttered under her breath as she gently shoved her co-workers inside without interrupting Leonard. Just as she did so, the crowd started pushing in from right behind her. Oh wow, not half bad. I feel like I've just been transported onto a boat tilde. I think, I'm going back to bed. Is the author here yet? Deities, adventurers, and civilians alike were slowly pushing their way in. Rose and her co-workers quickly went into work mode and managed to coordinate them into a semi-civil audience for Leonard's impromptu performance. Admittedly, most of the credit belonged to the people themselves. For once in their lives, by pressuring each other to keep quiet, the citizens of Orario actually policed themselves, which was, wow. As the song sounded as if it was coming to a close, Leonard smoothly continued on, with a lively follow-up piece, or perhaps it was part of the same song. Her family wasn't wealthy enough to afford enough outings involving the fine arts, which was why she had minimal knowledge of music aside from the instruments. And what sounds good? When he began the third song, everything started to fall into place for her. If the first song conjured up the image of a boat floating in the moonlight, then this third part made her feel as if she was on a ship sailing through a storm. His performance was outright fierce to the point where she briefly wondered if the piano would end up breaking from how he was using it. As his song came to an end with the final notes, several of the piano strings snapped and became entangled in the hammers. Leonard stood up right after, took off his glasses, and swept a hand over his hair. Should have done some maintenance on this thing first. Ah well. He looks really nice like that too, she thought to herself, then quickly remembered that she was on the clock and had to be professional. Thankfully, the wild cheers of the audience, the lucky ones in front of the queue, that filled up the library and nearby corridor, covered up her lapse of performance. Someone in the crowd had eventually asked where the author was, which prompted Leonard to properly introduce himself, surprising almost all of them as they clearly weren't familiar with his capabilities like she was. The book signing began in earnest soon after. Rose was assigned to manage the line of attendees just in front of Leonard's table, with one other colleague managing the crowds at the library entrance. Her other 3 colleagues were managing the book payments for any new buyers, cookie dispenser, and the raffle prizes. The tickets for the latter were drawn from what Leonard called a tombola drum. According to Leonard, the postcard variants would take the place of the consolation or attendance prize, while the luckier ones stood a chance to win colored posters of varying sizes, and the extremely lucky ones would take home scale figurines of the main characters. Rose could only occasionally pick up on some of the interesting conversations Leonard had with his fans or visitors that hadn't bought a book yet, as she was largely focused on her role. Most of the time, Rose felt that she could pat herself on the back for knowing the answer to this one foot, as she paid close attention whenever Leonard spoke about his story's setting and characters. But in some cases, there were some interesting questions and answers that she hadn't heard or thought of. For example, there was a question about the main heroine's status and skills. I never heard of a rare skill that can increase growth before. Is this real? Isn't this too unfair? Who can really say? After all, if anyone really had such a skill, that kind of secret would be taken to the grave, and no deity would ever volunteer that information if their familiar member had it. As for the skill, well, I think it's relatively well balanced, considering that I based the heroine's capabilities on Althea of the Hera. Familiar. Althea. The Silence. I had pretty much read through all of the Zeus and Hera records available at the Guild. I could infer from the private notes scattered about that she had a skill that actually conceptualized her sickness into a reduction of stats, despite that, her talent was so monstrous that she still managed to level up at a rate that broke everyone's best records. It is conceivable that there might have been an Excelia related trade-off, or something else. Rose hadn't known that Leonard had read that far into the Guild's records, and in our heroine's case, her accelerated growth comes at the cost of her already known, rapidly dwindling lifespan. Her strong desire to see the bottom of the dungeon before her life ends were the key factor in manifesting such a skill. I could go on, but I suggest that you take a look at the section of my guidebook containing my findings and theories on the fauna to fully understand what I'm getting at. I actually read that part and it kind of flew over my head, except the parts that tell me how to maximize status gains. Typical adventurer meathead. Leonard simply nodded with an indulgent smile. Of course. Did you bring your copy with you? I will be happy to sign it as well. Yeah. Is there anything you would like me to write for you? Oh, before that, could you write your name on the notepad here? I would not want to misspell your name or Anything. Incidentally, a few minutes later, one of the adventurers that Rose was advising, Riviera from the Loki Famelia, had reached Leonard's table and started questioning his choices about the elf heroine's characterization. His response basically consisted of reminding Riviera about the heroine having a shorter than normal human lifespan and that she can't afford to waste her life away like other elves by not enjoying contact with other living beings. There were some things that she couldn't hear because she had to manage an incident in the crowd, but Riviera ended up walking away flustered with a book off the shelf for purchase. Soon after, Rose found the elf shamelessly enjoying Leonard's homemade cookie that Rose still hadn't gotten the chance to sample. She hoped there would be some left for her afterward, but looking at how many people were lined up, she didn't have much hope for that. There were some questions about the male lead, although the interesting questions tended to revolve around how he was going to die. How much worse can his deaths get? Oh, believe me, you will come to hate rabbits a lot more when that question gets answered. It takes a special kind of person to imagine such painful ways to kill a person. How do you do it? Well, as you know, I'm something of a chef myself. Just then, there were several synchronized moans of pleasure as several attendees ate their free cookies together. In this scenario, I usually shout the main character's name while I'm chopping up a slab of meat like a butcher and imagining him as the meat. There were also questions from the rare few deities that came to the event. How about you join my familia? I will be blunt, I have no interest in joining your familia. Why not? I have lots of cute elf girls in my familia, you know. And what is that supposed to mean? I can see that you have a type. Fellow elf lovers like us should stick together. What? Rose turned her head around to gauge Leonard's reaction. His expression gave away nothing, but he clearly wasn't rejecting the deity's words outright like with the earlier invitation. Let me put it this way. I have no interest in this world's elves for the most part, because of their ridiculous cultural taboo over simply touching. That is taking the romance and purity fetish too far, even if it does lead to a lot of fun when they think handholding is lewd. The deity placed his hands on the table, looked Leonard in the eyes, and said, I get it. I really do. I understand that you are a man of culture, much like myself, but I see that you don't have the patience to deal with elves as they are now. Leonard nodded, then said, I have a limited lifespan as a human, even if I had a fauna, which I don't, I still would not spend years and decades trying to get with an elf that subscribes to this cultural system unless there are other factors involved. How about just casual sex? I trained the elves in my familia really well. Like you, I too like the journey as much as the end result. However, I'm afraid I don't have much time for the journey, and if I were to do it, well, I would like to go through the entire process. I understand. Truly, it's a shame. Deep inside we're kindred spirits, you and I. Yeah, great. So, anyways, don't forget to collect your raffle ticket, prize, and free cookie. She could only feel relief after the deity left the table. Whether it was due to not having to hear any more of that uncomfortable talk or because Leonard rejected the offer that would entice many other lesser men was something for her to think about. Later, the other deities were much less odious than that creepy male god. The two goddesses that came by, that also extended offers to Leonard, were also rejected in a relatively kindly manner. Eventually, there was a group that consisted of a goddess and 3 young girls that Rose was passingly familiar with, given that they were responsible for helping resolve public order issues despite their financial troubles. Evidently, Leonard shared Rose's positive opinion of the Astrea Familia and immediately greeted them happily, before engaging in a bit of casual chatter. Rose was somewhat familiar with Elise and Kagaya as the 2 young girls had leveled up relatively recently. The other elf child with glasses looked around 8 years old, and was likely a new member. It has been a while, Lady Astrea. Oh my, it has. I believe we first met just over half a year ago. Yeah, I wasn't doing that well financially back then. I still have to pay you back. For the soup. There is no need for that. I was just doing what I could to help that day. Well, I didn't mean a direct payment. I was thinking that I could donate some of my considerable income to your charity fund or foundation, whichever you had set up. Leonard sounded shocked when the goddess said that she had not set up any of that. He quickly informed her of the guild's policy of tax exemptions for charitable familiar organizations, and tax deduction claims for donors. Her friend soon volunteered to help them with the process as payment for the soup. Honestly, it sounded like an excuse to her. For what reason? Rose did not want to think about it right now. To her relief, he had started answering questions about the book again, which meant that he was back on track. Is the jacked bird real? Would an enhanced jacked bird really look like that? Elise asked about the special monster from Leonard's story excitedly. Well, Leonard glanced at Estrella for a moment, then said, I believe that it is possible if the conditions are right. But let us hope we never find out. After all, monsters like that tend to be anywhere from 2 to 4 levels worth of power higher than the monsters of their respective flaws. I have read enough of the Zeus and Hera history to know that many adventurers were killed by underestimating such monsters. Will the main characters get a cool skill like the pure and perfect me? I mean, sure, their skills are rare and powerful in their own way, but dash. The girl from the far east jabbed the red-haired girl at the side. Oh my, Elise, you moron. Don't go blabbering about your skills. Kagaya. Estrella chided the girl for her outburst. TSK. Leonard managed to placate them by saying that it would be difficult for most people to hear anything with all the noise even if they had the fauna. After that, Kagaya started asking practical questions about when his next book would come out and what would it cover. In response to that, Leonard reached beneath the table and pulled out some sheets of paper, saying that they were his first drafts about the middle floor and its monsters. It will still take a while for me to confirm a few more things, but the information here on the middle floors is still summarized succinctly enough to be useful. I hope you don't mind the lack of illustrations. Not at all. I can't say I expected this. Ahem, thank you for this gift. You're welcome. I just hope that it helps you get back to your goddess and your familia safely. Be a good girl and get along with them, all right? Rose could feel the girl pouting even without looking at her. Ah, fine. I guess Lyra would appreciate the extra knowledge, so I might as well share this with her. At a girl. Hey, stop patting my head. Excuse me. Ah, whoops. Leonard, how could you pat the head of a little girl, a stranger at that? What happened to all that talk about girls being too young for him? If that's the case, where were her head pats? Her ears could really use some. Ah, right, back to work. She definitely was not thinking unprofessional thoughts on the clock. In the meantime, Elise gleefully exclaimed, Oh ho, is that your weakness? Kagaya. Estrella proceeded to join in with the teasing and giggled. He, I didn't know. You like that, Kagaya-chan tilde if you want. I can pat your head all you like. A bit after that, Estrella encouraged their youngest, apparently, member to approach Leonard. Good morning. I'm Kelty Srower. Good morning to you as well, Kelty. I'm Leonard Enfield, as you have probably heard one too many times. So, any questions? About the main character, after dying so many times, he decides to find a way to never die again. Is immortality really possible? The young elf started to sound really excited. Leonard answered her enthusiasm by leaning across the table before continuing. Personally, I think it's possible. Although, whether he gets the type of immortality he wants is another matter. What do you mean? Did you ever hear the tragedy of Fels the Wise? No, I thought not. It's not a story the deities would tell you. It's an Altina city legend. Fels was a great sage of Altina. So powerful and so wise, she could use her mage and mystery developmental abilities to influence reality to create a stone of eternal life. She had such a knowledge of magic and the nature of life that she could even keep the ones she cared about from dying. She could actually save people from death. The abyss of magic is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. What happened to her? She became so proud of her achievement. The only thing she was afraid of was losing her philosopher's stone, which eventually, of course, she did. Unfortunately, she showed her deity her magnum opus. Then her deity shattered the stone and condemned her to eternal life as a rotting skeleton. It's ironic. She could save others from death, but not herself. Is it possible to learn this power? Not from a deity. Oh no, I shouldn't be asking these things. Well, just don't dwell on it for too long. It's just a legend, after all. Considering how well-read Leonard was, she wouldn't be surprised if that story was more than just a legend. She couldn't really tell whether it was real right now, since Estrella did not say anything about it aside from apologizing for taking up too much of his time and moving on. A few hours later, the event had finally ended and Leonard had his hired help move his things out of the guild library. Good job, everyone. I appreciate all the help today. After Leonard said his goodbyes as everyone went on for their designated break, he walked up to her and held up a wrapped-up package. I prepared some lunch for the two of us, just in case things got really busy and we wouldn't be able to catch lunch elsewhere quick enough for you to make it back to work on time. Rose accepted the lunchbox gratefully, feeling touched by his consideration. Thank you, that helps a lot, really. You're always doing nice stuff for me. Don't mention it. She frowned. It's not just a little matter for me. I didn't mean it like that. I figured. Say, will you be free for the Holy Night Festival? The Christmas ripoff. What? Just ignore that. Okay, well, I was wondering if you wanted to watch the parade with me. I should be able to make it. Yeah, I will just be quick with my trip into the dungeon with my escorts. You know, got to document the seasonal monsters that drop those snow gems. It's a date. Yeah, sure. I'll be heading home now and leaving you to your work. I have to prepare some documents for Estrella's charity thing. All right, take care. I mean it, public order has been rather lacking today. Leonard stared at her for a few seconds, then glanced towards the side. She followed his eyes and saw that he was looking at an empty alley. Don't even think about walking through those dangerous shortcuts. I wasn't thinking it. As a faunaless civilian, I wouldn't be doing such things. Unless I lacked common sense. Well, I'll be seeing you. Wait. My ears are sore. The crowd was very noisy, among other things. You want me to rub them? Don't forget to pat my head while you're at it. Oh, what the hell? Why not? Like a shitty version of Naya's evangelist job class? Conditions met. Molester, genius, job class is now unlocked. What the fuck? Where did this come from? When did I ever unlock this? Oh no. It's the head pats, wasn't it? How do head pats even count? Help menu. Click. Why do I get a genius tag for this class? It is because you are a natural deviant. Can I delete this class? No. Guess I have no choice but to seal this class and never use its abilities. In other words, repress. This will all for today, next part coming soon. Before that, please like, share and subscribe.